All right, welcome back. Here we are on the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections Podcast. Super excited that you would join us here today. Episode, man, we're past 200 amazing coaches from literally around the world here on the Gill Connections Podcast. If you haven't seen or heard, I should say, our past guests, please, in the app that you're using right now or here on YouTube, if you're watching us there, go back and look. Some amazing people all the way back to guest number 1 have been on the podcast. And I'm super excited about one of these amazing guests today. Help me welcome head coach of track and field and cross country at Oklahoma State, the Cowboys and the Cowgirls. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Dave Smith. Dave, how are you, sir?
Doing well, thanks.
How's life in, I'm going to get this wrong, Stillwater?
Got that right.
Yeah.
Tough one. It's great. Things are rolling along. We're bouncing through into the outdoor season and had some good early season performances, and I think starting to round into shape right at the right time.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, I'm always amazed. I'm amazed at track coaches in general, because what you do from, call it Labor Day all the way through maybe June, that's quite a feat. Distance coaches, especially a former non-distance coaching coach, it really does amaze me what you guys do. So super excited to talk about some of the things that you do at Oklahoma State and really how you got there and to the position you're at today. So why don't we jump in our Wayback Machine here, Dave? Somewhere, assuming that you were an athlete, somewhere coaching changed in your mind from something that was done to you, Dave, go run this, go lift that, jump here, etc., to an idea of like, oh, wait a minute, this might be my career. Where does coaching begin for you as a career, a thought?
It was an evolution, kind of a slow process. My dad was a high school coach when I was young. Coached a lot of different sports, kind of just an all around, different sport every year. I think he coached some golf and tennis, football, track, basketball, kind of coached some of everything. And so I was always around. He was a high school teacher, so I was always around my dad, interacting with kids. And in the summers, we would go on backpacking trips up in the state of Washington, the Olympic National Forest and National Park. And my dad would take high school kids with him. So I was kind of always around that and that kind of mentoring environment, and just was very comfortable in it. And then I ran at Michigan State, and when I was finishing up my time at Michigan State, I just really loved being in the college environment. I loved college campus. I loved the university lifestyle. I liked everything that went around the university with the kind of the information, the academic environment, athletics. At Michigan State, they had a great performing arts center where traveling Broadway shows would come through. And as a student, if you went to the day of, you could buy the leftover tickets for $5. So I saw a lot of great musicals and plays that way. And so I just loved the whole university environment. And so when I finished my undergrad, I didn't know what to do with my life and really wanted to be on the college campus. So I decided to go to get a doctorate. And I didn't know what I wanted my degree in. Didn't have a set plan. So I just kind of applied to a random program, at the University of Washington, and didn't get into the program I applied to, but got contacted by another part of the university asking me to apply to their program, and got into that. Well, it's pharmacology and neurobiology, and I can kind of do some things that sound interesting. We've got no experience in this. I have no idea what I'm doing in the lab, but I'm gonna go try it. And so I thought that'll keep me on a university campus and maybe give me a route to being a professor and working with young people. And I kind of that's what I wanted to do. But about midway through, I realized that it wasn't the university I loved so much. It was the athletic department. Mm-hmm. And in my last year of my PhD, there was a coaching change at the University of Washington, and Orrin Richburg became the director of both men's and women's programs. And I wrote him a long letter kind of describing what I thought could be better at the University of Washington in terms of track and field and cross country. And my dad had played football at Washington. I always wanted to go to Washington. The recruiting situation when I was a high school kid just didn't work out. And anyway, I thought I knew a lot. So I wrote Orrin this long letter, and he called me, and, I'd never spoken to Orrin before, but it turns out that when I was a high school kid, he had called Jim Bibbs at Michigan State and said, hey, you need to recruit this kid from Washington because our men's team's not recruiting him. He can be pretty good. So he kind of guided my journey to Michigan State without me knowing it. And then when I wrote him his letter, he called me and said, hey, it sounds like you want to be the coach here. And I didn't. but he said, I've already hired a guy, but I want you to be our volunteer. And so he'd hired Greg Metcalf. And so Greg Metcalf was just starting, and Orrin said, hey, he's going to be here in a couple of weeks. I want you to come down and meet him the first day. So Greg and I had kind of crossed paths in high school. We were both from the state of Washington, same age, same events. But Greg was a 1A kid and I was a 2A kid, so we didn't really compete against each other. But when I met Greg, it was instantaneous friendship, and we've been best buddies ever since. In fact, you called me, I was on my headphones. I was talking to Greg on the phone, who he's on the track right now at Texas, doing a workout with his athletes. I just came off the track with my athletes, so we were kind of comparing notes.
Well, let's unpack this. First of all, did you get your doctorate?
Yeah.
Oh, yep. So I'm sorry. We don't have the wise, the wonderful Coach Smith here. We have Dr. Smith. Sorry about that.
Dr. Dave Smith. That's
me,
yeah,
absolutely. Dr. Dave. That's what we're going to call you. You got to start your own podcast, Dr. Dave on track and field. That'd be perfect, man. I love that. Okay, let's unpack some of this. This is amazing. Okay, I was wondering if you were from Washington, because you mentioned going packing there. So you went Washington. When you were in high school, go back to high school. Did your dad coach you in high school for track and field? Or?
No. My dad never coached me. I think
it
was kind of a conscious decision on his part. I think he wanted to be my dad, not my coach. And I have 3 children of my own now, and I kind of feel the same way. I think sometimes it's really hard, especially for daughters who are coached by their dads. I think that kind of creates a challenging dynamic at times. Yeah. And I don't know how I would navigate it effectively. So I've just already decided I'm never going to coach my kids. I'm just going to be their dad, and they're going to have their own coaches, and that'll be a separate relationship from mine. If they even go into track and field, I don't know what they're going to do. They're 7, 5, and 2. So we got some time, but whatever they do, I don't want to coach them. I just want to kind of be around and be supportive.
My son is 6th grade, and he's just starting track. And I didn't it was literally kind of like, maybe do basketball, you sit the bench at a D1, you're still full ride. So, maybe we go basketball, but he's doing track, and, so I don't go to practices. I go to the meets and I help out, and I try very hard not to be that dad, even though, that dad has some credentials, but I'm always like, hey, just listen to coach. He's fine. I'll help you if they're not, they got a ton of kids out here. So I help, a little bit on the side when the coach isn't around. But yeah, it is so hard for me. One, it's so hard because I want my son to do well in the sport that I love. And the other part is it's so hard. It's like, oh, I know we won't get along very well. Just be dad, don't be coach. I respect that a lot. How did you get into, assuming you were a distance runner, what drew you to distance running versus sprinting or jumping or maybe even throwing? Washington, you have the javelin. Maybe you could have been a javelin thrower.
Yeah, it's what I know and what I love and what I understand and what I'm passionate about. And, what I discovered in grad school was that I think I was one night I was out at a bar with one of my lab mates, and we had a break in our experiments. It was probably about midnight. We had to get some food. So we ran up to the Ave to get some food, and we're sitting there talking, and he's talking to me about his experiments, about the projects he's working on, papers he's read, things he's about to write. He's all animated and excited and really, into what he's doing. And I remember thinking, in my head, I'm smarter than this guy because I'm smarter than everybody, but I will never be as good at this as he is because he's passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing this because I want people to know I'm smart. I want to make money. I want to walk in with a white lab coat and everybody say, oh, there's the neuroscientist. But I wasn't passionate about it. And I realized that doing things for those reasons, you chase those types of things, those goals or those objectives, and you leave your passion behind, and your passion doesn't come after you. And when I did that 1 year, my last year, I started volunteering with Greg and Orrin at the University of Washington, and I still didn't want to do it. But I didn't want to coach. That hadn't entered my idea yet. That was a profession. But I knew that I didn't want to be in the lab, that's not just, I was never going to be great, because I don't think you can be great unless you have passion. Yeah. And so at the end of that first year, Orrin Richburg called me from Buffalo, New York. He was at the national championships. He said, hey, I got a guy here, a buddy of mine. He's looking for a distance coach. You'd be perfect for it. You need to talk to him. Greg Scholars, he's at Texas Tech. He's a distance coach. And I wasn't really into that. I'd never heard of Texas Tech. I'd never been to Texas. I didn't want to leave the state of Washington. And so I didn't want to do it, but he got me on the phone with Greg Scholars, and Greg is the best recruiter on the face of the planet.
Wow.
The guy is absolutely amazing. And he convinced me to come at least, he said, just come down and come on an interview. And so I flew into Lubbock, Texas. I remember
Texas.
it was in August. It was probably 115 degrees that day. I went for a run and nearly died and literally saw vultures circling and thought they smelled death.
This is it.
I feel it. And anyway, Greg convinced me to take the job for 1 year. And that year changed my life. I think I was there for maybe a week. And I realized this is it. This is my passion. And I'm never going to make the money I want. I'm never going to have the respect I thought I wanted. I'm never going to have the notoriety that I thought I might get as a neuroscientist. In the meantime, my advisors from the University of Washington are telling me, oh, you could be a Nobel Prize winner. All the things you would say, as we say to track kids, you can be an Olympian. Well, to a scientist, you can be a Nobel winner, which is probably BS, but you say it.
Right.
And I kept thinking, yeah, but even a Nobel Prize doesn't excite me at all. Who cares? And so I realized that I'm going to give up all these things I want, but I'm going to have my passion.
Okay, pause there. We got some more to unbuckle before we get there, because that to me, what you're describing, you said within the week, you're like, it was that aha moment of like, oh,
yeah,
this is what I was actually put here for. So I love to explore. So let's put a pin in that real quick. I am always interested. You said you went to Michigan State. First of all, did you run for Walt?
No, Jim Stinzy.
Walt was at Central Michigan. Oh, is that right? Okay. All right. Yeah. I love Walt. I love Stinzy too, but Walt was the first person top of my head. Not a lot of people, even though people that eventually become track coaches and maybe move around to a lot of places, have a hard time. Many people have a hard time leaving home, right? Washington, you obviously loved it. You went backpacking and all these kind of things. Your dad's a coach there. What made you go all the way to Michigan? I mean, that's a Midwest. That's not the West Coast. That's a whole different life. What did you go? Why did you choose Michigan State? And what did you think your career was going to be? When we go into college, we kind of think we're going to be something. And maybe it was that I don't know if you had expressed at this point that you were going to be in the lab and be a Nobel winner, but what were you thinking, and why Michigan State?
Well, Michigan State, my official visits were Army, Michigan State, Auburn, and Mankato State.
Oh, holy cow.
I tried to get some of everything.
Yeah, you did. Very good. Yes.
but the closest visit to home was Mankato State. And that was 2,000 miles away.
Right.
And so part of me wanted to be different from all my classmates. Everybody was going to Washington or Washington State.
Right.
And I wanted to be different. Washington did not recruit me. Had they recruited me, I might have been different, but they didn't. Washington State recruited me. I think they called me maybe the week before my state meet, my senior year. It was John Chaplin. He said, hey, are you going to be a Cougar or what? I was like, well, at this point.
If you don't know John Chaplin, that was perfect.
Yeah. And John, my mom was personal friends with Mrs. Chaplin, John's wife. Oh. My mom worked in the state education, superintendent of public instruction. She worked for them. And John's wife was somehow involved in education in Pullman and Eastern Washington. So my mom interacted with her a lot and they became close friends. Uh-huh. So there was a personal connection there a little bit. But anyway, by that point, I'd kind of already taken my visits, and I canceled my last visit, I think was to Colorado. And I had just decided, I was tired of visiting. I just didn't want to take any more trips, and thought I'll figure it out between these 4 schools. And so part of it was, I think I wanted to be different, go see something new and kind of set off on my own and kind of figure out what it's like to be, on my own 2 feet. And so I want to get away and try something different. And that's, Michigan State, the reason Michigan State out of all those schools was really Jim Stinzy. I felt like in the recruiting process, he was the one coach who was completely honest. I think the first thing he said to me is, hey, we're not any good. And we don't have a good program. We got a long way to go. It's going to take a while. I'd like to promise you Big 12 championships, NCAA championships. That's probably not reality, but it's going to be a process that you're going to be a part of if you come here. We're going to start that way. And during that recruiting process, I felt like he was the only one that wasn't trying to sell me thing. And again, tell me, you're going to be an Olympian. You're going to win that. He wasn't telling me that. He said, likely you're not. He goes, you're pretty good, but we don't know where life's going to go. And he was just very honest. And I just appreciated that. He wasn't not an aggressive recruiter. In fact, I don't think I talked to him more than maybe a handful of times on the phone. He did not come and make a home visit. Everybody else did. And so I don't know if it's just kind of that, I don't know, something about his personality drew me to him.
Yeah.
And I just felt like he was a guy that was going to stick with me no matter what. And I tell people this now, for a lot of reasons, probably it wasn't the perfect choice for me. But for working with Jim Stinzy, I picked the right human being, because I ended up having an injury that kept me out of a big chunk of my senior year, and then my first year and a half at Michigan State. And the injury I had is now called a sports hernia, but back then there was no such thing, and no one knew. And it was eventually doctors told me it's either in your head,
run through the pain, right?
Logical, or and so when I got to a year and a half and them told me it's in my head, I thought, well, okay, if it's in my head, I'm just gonna go ahead and run. So I found a way to get through it. But I struggled for a year and a half, 2 years, not to be able to train at all, gained a bunch of weight. I got depressed and went to the weight room and just really bulked up because I wanted to exercise. So I was in the weight room. And I think it went from about 150 pounds to 175 pounds. So as a distance runner, yeah, that wasn't a good move.
I can't picture that, Dave. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was benching a lot of weight because, I thought I'm gonna have some, if I can't run, I'm gonna have some pecs. And, but Jim Stinzy never made me feel, I already felt bad enough. I felt guilty. I was on a big scholarship. And at Michigan State, the way they calculate they get a scholarship pool, a pot of money that's equal to 12.6 in-state scholarships. Right. But I was an out-of-state guy, so I took a lot more than one in-state scholarship. So I was costing them a ton. And Jim never let me feel ostracized. He never made me feel guilty. He never pressured me to leave or to go on medical exemption. He stuck by me the entire time. And I probably never thanked him for that the way I should, but it's shaped the way I coach and the way I approach people now, because I remember the way it felt to feel guilty, to feel like you weren't part of the team, you were letting people down, and to have a guy who stood by me and just never heaped on top of that. And so for the most important reason, I chose the right place.
We almost titled the podcast the Gill Athletics Track and Field Shout Out Podcast. So shout out to Jim Stinzy, honestly. Yeah. And I also, now after 200, I get to do this. I get to challenge our guest. You mentioned that you maybe have not told Jim kind of that story, your feelings. And I'm going to challenge you when we get done today, sometime this week. I want you to reach out to Jim and just be like, hey, man. So this is what I talk about, the part of the podcast where we get to talk about people that have been through our lives that maybe we haven't thought about lately. I'm going to challenge you to reach out to him this week, even if it's just through an email of just like, hey, Jim, man, thank you. Gosh, I'm not where I am today without your authenticity and humbleness back then. So thanks for not giving up on me. We all need coaches like that don't give up on us. And sounds like Jim was, you're right, the perfect coach for you at that time. That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Have you ever hugged a porcupine?
Being from Alabama, you might be surprised. No, I have not.
Being warm and fuzzy with Jim Stinzy is like trying to hug a porcupine.
Yeah, that's okay. we can virtually hug.
He's not a mushy guy. He's not a touchy-feely guy, but
that's okay.
Like I said, Jim has been very influential in my life and my coaching career and kind of the way I do things. And to me, he was the best coach in America, just because of the way he treats people and the way he is as a human being.
I love it. And I love how, I don't know if you noticed this little faux pas that you put into that story there. I love how singularly focused you are on Big 12 championships and NCAA championships. You talked about when Jim was recruiting you, you said something like, he didn't promise me Big 12 championships, et cetera. I'm like, well, I was like, sorry, I hope he didn't, because he couldn't give that to you no matter what. It was just interesting to me when you said that. I was like, oh, I know where your mind is always at. It's the Big 12. I love it. I love it. Hey, real kind of quick question to put in here, and then we'll keep going the story. It just reminded me when you were talking about visits, something that's come up here recently is no more cap on 5 official visits. My old days, I stopped coaching in 2005. It was 5 visits. You were when you're recruiting, you were hardcore to get one of those 5 visits. What do you think about that? I'm just curious for someone who's in that position where that's going to affect you and your staff's recruiting. What do you think about this? No more cap on official visits?
I don't think it affects us at all. I think it has zero impact.
Are you talking about on you at Oklahoma State or us as a coaching body?
Honestly, me at Oklahoma State, but us as a coaching body as well. At least, in the athletes we coach, it's rare that I have someone take 5 visits. Rare, really rare. Mm-hmm. Usually it's 2, 3, maybe 4 is a lot. Like in my experience, I took 4. And the 4th one, I was just like, okay, another academic building, another study hall, another track,
All right.
honestly, this is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
So I canceled my 5th. And so I don't know what's going to affect us. If someone has taken 5 visits and they call me and say, hey, I haven't found what I'm looking for, I want to come, I'm not sure I'm going to be interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you got to give me a 1 in 6 chance. And maybe it's better than 1 in 6 because you've already ruled out 5, but probably not. If you haven't found it in 5, you're probably going to come to your 6 and think, I still haven't found it. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to go that way. And if I'm talking to a kid, he says, hey, you're one of 8 visits I'm taking, I'm probably going to say, yeah, well, you get us narrowed down to the 3 or 4 and I'll bring you. But other than that, I don't want to waste your time or my time or, right. Our time, it's money, but our time is incredibly valuable and there's just not enough of it. And, this weekend I'm staying home from a track meet because I'm hosting a kid on a visit who was a junior and, we're speeding things up now and kids are trying to decide earlier. So, right. The recruit I'm hosting is a really good athlete. So I'm going to do it, but you can't do that very often. And like you mentioned earlier, spending time with your family and kind of having time to do things personally, I don't want to have 50 visits, mm-hmm. So I don't think it's going to affect us much at all. Yeah. It's not going to affect me.
Yeah, good. I like that. Yeah, we hear about these, it kind of goes both ways here. We hear about these kids who are, on social media talking about their 27th, 28th, 29th offer. And I hear, I push back, no longer being a coach. I get to put, sit on the outside and kind of see the whole spectrum. And there's certainly coaches who complain or, I don't want a kid who's on his 28th offer, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. And I asked back, well, who offered the 28th and the 29th and the coaches? We are the ones who offered them. So, I mean, so if a kid's on his 9th visit and someone's going to complain about, no longer 5, it's like, well, people are, you coaches are the ones who are offering the 9th and 10th and God knows, we're going to hear someone on their 20th visit, by the way. It's going to happen. Someone's going to do it. So, okay. One more topic before we get to Texas Tech here. I am curious about this letter to Orrin Richburg. I cannot, first of all, I can't imagine Orrin reading it. I'm shocked when you said he read it and reached out to you. I was like, thought, if it had been me, I would have ripped it up. What was in your mind that you're emailing Orrin? And maybe you didn't even know who Orrin was. You certainly know Orrin now. Great guy, has his opinions, of course. But you wrote him a letter of how Washington could be better. You're writing the guy who's responsible for it, basically telling him, here's how I would have done the job, sir.
It was just generally, I looked at the state of Washington and the athletes that came out of that state and went to other places and the things they did at other places. And it always drove me nuts that you couldn't, and honestly, credit to Andy Powell, he's doing this right now. You couldn't stay at a 30 to 50 mile radius of that campus and have a really good team. And that you don't have to go looking all over the world. You got some of the best young distance runners in the world right there within, like I said, 50, 100, 150 mile radius of your campus. And, I just felt like Washington, for me, because I had this emotional connection to it, because my dad played football there. I went to every single football game as a kid. We went every single weekend, drive up to Seattle. We lived, an hour away, but we drive up every single Saturday. There was a home game. So, I kind of wanted it to be great. And, I just wrote things, kind of from the heart about, kind of frustrations. Is I wasn't an alum, but I wrote like an alum. I guess I am an alum because I was finishing my PhD.
Right.
And one of the reasons when I went to grad school, I only applied to Washington because number one, I had a background in my family. Number two, I wanted to go to Washington football games again. And, back then Don James was still the coach and they were rolling. And so, So when I was there, I went to every basketball game, every football game. Wow. I went to baseball games. As a student athlete, I wasn't an athlete anymore. I was around the athletic department. And the thing that frustrated me is that the track program was struggling. The cross country team was not, and it wasn't any one coach. It wasn't any one set of people because it had been over time, for several years, or many years that it kind of was frustrated. So, it was probably pretty arrogant to write. It was probably pretty, but I wasn't in athletics, so I didn't care.
Yeah, right. What was going to happen? The worst was going to happen.
I was going to be some professor on some campus, someplace in America. So who cares? I didn't have any connections.
With these Marvel movies, they're exploring the multiverse, right? So let's say you go on to become a doctorate and you're professor at Washington, you win the Nobel, Orrin is still crabbing, that professor. He had the audacity to write me a letter.
Yeah. 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 And I just, I did not understand, like I do now, the limitations that every place has. I saw Washington as this, shining Mecca on the hill. But when you get into the weeds of it, you realize that, man, Washington, like Oklahoma State, like University X, all has their own advantages and disadvantages they have to deal with. And you don't understand that when you're looking at it from the outside. And like now, I drive and I listen to our local radio station every day. In the morning, it just talks about community, what's going on. In the afternoon, it becomes sports talk. I listen to every day people call in with advice from Mike Gundy, our football coach, right? And every guy who calls in knows better what to do with our football program than Mike Gundy does, or our basketball team with Mike Boynton, or whatever. There's everybody has an idea and they know better what to do. Well, it turns out, when you listen to it now, you think these people have no idea how the world works, or And so the letter I wrote, I don't even remember what I said, but I'm sure if I was to read it now, I'd be embarrassed. So
it would be it'd be a letsrun.com post is what that letter would
probably,
be.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly what it was.
We just had this discussion. I can't remember if it was Cliff or Jason, just here in the last few episodes here of the podcast. We talked about that. There's one thread on Let's Run that I read religiously. It's the coaches, where people are going, what jobs are open and everything. And it really just, the audacity of some people to say, oh, if I was at that school, we'd be the national champions. Yep. It's like, oh, you have no idea how much scholarship money they have, recruiting limitations, whether it's, what states get in state versus out of state, things like that, budgets. Or
people look at these great programs. They go, if I was there, I would win. You don't know that the pressure and the expectation and the personalities and the people that think they have a say in your program, you don't understand what that does to what you're trying to do.
Yep.
And I stayed at Oklahoma State now for 21 years, and there have been other opportunities. And people said, why did you take those? I said, because I know what I got here, and people aren't looking over my shoulder. They're not micromanaging me. They're not second guessing everything I do. I get to be, kind of complete control of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have some disadvantages, but there's a huge advantage. And maybe school, whatever, that's got, all this money and this resource and this name brand and this image, you think, I'll go there and, oh, now I don't have to recruit. Things are going to happen naturally. And that's not the way it is. And the grass is not always greener. And with that, that bigger name and that bigger, brand comes bigger expectation, bigger involvement from the alumni, more people thinking they can do your job better than you can, the pressure from administrators, community fan. There's a trade-off. So yeah, when you're young and arrogant, not in the sport, and you think you know everything, you can pick apart what should be done differently. But probably half the things I said should be done were probably NCAA illegal. I had no idea. But
where does this letter live? That's the throwback I want. I want to read this letter.
Hopefully Oren destroyed it.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think I remember being like 7 pages of typed.
Oh,
yeah,
Dave.
Yeah, it was highlight. It was like broken down into categories. This is what you hear, this is what you there, and who knows what I don't remember. I just remember thinking, man, this can be fixed. And Oren called me and says, he read it, said, it sounds like you want to coach this team. I go, no, I don't. I just, he said, I need you to be a volunteer. Come down here. I want you to meet. I got a great guy. I need you to meet him. And he introduced me to Greg. And like I said,
that's awesome.
It was instant friend. Greg Metcalf. But if you meet Greg Metcalf, there is
he's awesome.
Absolutely. I call him the mayor because he's always kissing babies and shaking hands. And there's nobody he doesn't know, and he lights up a room and makes everybody feel welcome. And we were the same age, and he could have very easily felt, like, wait a minute, we need to keep this guy away because I'm just starting here. It's my first coaching job.
Yeah.
I don't need some guy who thinks he can come in here. But Greg was the opposite. He was welcoming, inviting, just included me in everything. Really what I did is hold a watch for him and drive vans for him. But he made me feel important and a part of the program. So
that's a skill. And he's got that skill for sure.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah. And last thing before we move back to Texas Tech here, when we talk about, people outside of the program thinking of it, they also don't forget. I think people sometimes forget, because when we're fans, someone is winning all the time, right? If you're in a program, you're only winning when you win. Winning is hard. Like
Yeah.
when you look at, I remember going up to Robert Johnson at indoor nationals when they won the women by like 40 points or something. It was huge, and I went up to him. I was like, I know everybody's going to say how easy this was, but I know even by 40 points, you were sweating it the whole way until it was, the points were fine. It's hard to win. Whether you are JUCO, NAIA, D3, D1, state meet at high school, it's hard to win. And people think that they just have the magic clue and that they would win automatically, not knowing that there's 100 other great coaches and programs that are gunning for that same trophy you are, pal. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think getting to the top is fun. It's a lot of fun climbing the mountain. And I think, at least from my experience and talking to the coaches, for my colleagues who've kind of been in the same position, getting there is fun. Staying there is a different kind of challenge, a different kind of reward. To me, it wasn't as fun. It's stressful. It's exhausting. It's, when you get to the top, like anybody, any profession or any athlete, you get to the top, there's only one way to go. You can stay there and be stagnant at the top, or you can fall. And it's a different feeling. And I think coaches who get to the top and stay at the top for a long time, it's unique. I think we had about a 6 or 7 year run from about 2007 to 2013 where we were really, really good. And then we went through some tough times here at OSU. And I think, watching what NAU has done over the last 6, 7, 8 years, under, a large part of it under Mike Smith, but also under Eric Hines, who kind of built it and got him there. And before them, we went John Hayes. It was a progression where that program's been very good for a long time, and now has been the best for 6, 7, 8 years, depending on how you characterize it. They've been really, really, really good, and they're always in the hunt. That's incredibly hard. And what Mike Smith's doing right now is he's a good coach, X's and O's, but there's a bunch of X's and O's guys. That's not what makes you special. I think what he's been able to do with his team culture and the attitude and keeping the edge. We have a wrestling coach here, John Smith, who is largely recognized as maybe the greatest wrestler of all time. He won 6 straight world titles, including two Olympic titles. Wow. And until just recently, he had the record for the most. Someone finally passed him to get to 7, but it took him 14 years. John did it all 6 in 6 years, just 6 straight. Then he retired. I talked to John. I said, God, first, how'd you do that? Right. Secondly, why stop at 6? You're on top. And he said, because I couldn't find a way to keep my edge. After 6 times, the 6th one was really hard to kind of create in my mind the edge or the hunger or the, kind of the disrespect from somebody else, something to fire me up. He said, I couldn't find it anymore. I knew it was over. And so he left after 6. And I think that's true. It's really hard to kind of keep manufacturing this us versus them, against the world. When you feel like you get a chip in your shoulder or disrespected when you're climbing, you can say that. No one believes in us. No one respects us. It's us against the world. We're in the foxhole together. It's you and me and these other 5 guys, and we got to get this done. Right. That's different than when you're on the top. You've won, 5 out of 6 or 6 out of 7, or if you're John Wooden, 8 out of 12, or whatever it is. You're trying to think, how do I create this sense of urgency again? And it gets harder and harder and harder. So coaches who can do it, man, I hats off. It's a tough thing to do.
Well, let's keep exploring that. How do you do it? We can't. You mentioned Wooden, some of those other guys, and I immediately thought about McDonald and
Pat Henry,
Pat, sure, exactly, right. So we can't guess how they do it. Dave, you've won many championships. How do you do it? And what I mean by that is when you talked about John Smith and he did it individually, meaning he was the one competing. That seems super, super tough, right? Because like you said, how do you manufacture the disrespect and all that kind of stuff? You at least are doing it with a different mix of kids each time. I would say it's pretty rare. You probably have the exact same 5 and all that kind of stuff. So how do you do it every year? You've been to the top, you've been to the bottom, and you're doing a lot of at the top here in the last, really decade. How do you continually find the motivation to help motivate the troops, if you will, to always be giving their best and trying to win and things like that?
Well, first thing I would say, just a story, is that in 2010, we won the national championships by 120 points.
Jeez.
We won by 120. we returned our entire roster, and we had a kid transfer in who finished 27th at nationals.
Oh, you're golden.
Yeah, can't lose. And that year, Wisconsin, with 5 guys, they had 5 guys that were great, and then some good college runners, but they weren't going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Those 5 guys beat us by 35 or 40 points. And how do we lose that?
Yeah.
We lost it because we went into the year and every single guy thought, we've got 5 returning All-Americans. We added a 6th. We got our 7th guy who just finished 66th at the national championships. He's the 40th returner. So we've got 7 guys returning in the top 40.
Yeah.
Can't lose.
Yeah.
I don't have to be great because so-and-so is going to be great. And I don't have to be great because so-and-so is going to be great. And I think our attitude all year was, hey, we're going to get this done because we are going to get this done, not I'm going to get it done.
Mm.
And I watched Wisconsin, and no disrespect to their 6th and 7th men who were younger guys, and just, they had 5 veterans who they looked around and thought, man, there's 5 of us in this foxhole, and we got to hold the line. Mm. And there's no cavalry coming, and we got to get it done. And all year long, I could feel it coming. And I thought, we've won 2 straight. We just won we should win this one, but I'm nervous. I see Wisconsin has got something going. They got something brewing right now. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, they got to nationals and they ran like their hair was on fire. They were unbelievable. And we ran a good race. But they beat us pretty soundly. And so, and then we lost half that team, and the next year came back and won. And I think, again, because we lost half that team, and all of a sudden you couldn't count on German Fernandez or John Kosky or Colby Lowe, whoever else was coming in. You couldn't count on those guys now.
Right. The
other guys thought, well, it's our turn. We got to do this. And I think that's how we came back and won again in 2012.
And a guy like you is analyzing it the whole season. Like I said, you saw Wisconsin, you're watching their meets, you're probably watching NAU or whoever else, there was probably 3, 4, 5 teams that could have been in the mix that year. So you're kind of watching, analyzing, a guy like you, Dr. Dave, all the courses. So if someone runs quote unquote fast or slow, what that really means for that course. And, the guys that are the generals there, Mick Byrne and all those guys who, amazing. He actually is committed to be on the podcast as well. And this is going to be great because I got to remember, I want to get his side of it as well. This will be fun to complete the whole circle on that story.
Yeah.
There. But how do you, as a coach, as you're watching it, you can see it. I can almost see you seeing it. Like you see it playing out. Like, you ever seen the movie, A Beautiful Mind? Where he's got all, it's like, I'm helpless, but I can see it all. That seems helpless. What are you doing during the year to quote unquote wake up the truth? Or is there anything you can do? It just feels very helpless there.
You try, and you try not to project panic, although I was feeling panic. Mm-hmm. You try not to project weakness or nervousness, but to project urgency and focus. And you try to project those things. But again, I think we had some absolute killers on that team with German Fernandez, German Machezo, Colby Lowe, Shadrach Kipchirchir, Tom Farrell. I mean, these are all guys that were these are not, Shadrach's now run 27-0. German was German. Germa's run 27 low or 27 mid. Kirabel Rasa was on that team. Kirabel's now run 27 low and 13 low. And these guys, Tom Farrell won 13-10. These are guys that ended up being, back when that was still fast, really good runners. And I just, again, I could see it coming. I could feel it playing out. It's funny you described the beautiful mind thing, because I told our guys this year, hey, we went out to our cross country course. We're about to host the national championships. I say, hey, look at this course now. There's no one here, and see it. See this course as the chessboard. See where it is. Mm-hmm. And now realize on race day, there's all this crap going on. There's chaos. Mm-hmm. When you get on the day, that chaos, you got to see the course. Let the chaos disappear. There's nobody else here. Do what you do. Run it like you run it. Know how to be you. And you got to just let the noise, the chaos evaporate, and just go back to this moment and see the course is empty. It's you running on the course. So, that's a race specific, but the season's the same way. Mm-hmm. I tell guys, hey, there's all this noise going on around. There's people talking about who's going to win and who can't lose, and we can't lose. That's the worst thing we can hear. We can't lose, because I guarantee we can lose. And you mentioned there was other teams. Stanford was rolling. They had a great group. There were several teams, but Wisconsin's the one that scared me. And honestly, Mick Byrne created this sense of urgency. He created a belief. He had those guys, angry, pissed off at the world. It's, that's when he started this Badger Tough stuff. And, I could hear it in his voice. I could hear it in the guys. I got their little interviews after races that they knew we got 5, 6, 7 guys, and there's no cavalry coming. It's up to us. We got to defend this turf. We got to get it done for each other. And that team was locked in. Yeah. And so when I start to see teams that are locked in, and I that's when I get nervous. And there's a lot of teams that have guys run fast that don't always really get to me. I think, they're running fast, but running fast isn't that important, especially this time of year. But when you start to hear this attitude and that you can feel it, and this vibe, I can't really describe it, but you just know. And I knew we were in trouble. And I kept thinking, well, they've only got, if they lose any of that top 5, they're in trouble. There's a drop off. The other guys are young, and when you count on young guys, it's tough, So
yeah, I love how you describe that, Dave. What you described there about how you were talking to the kids about seeing the course, and it's a blank open chessboard right now, but chaos is coming, right? And you got to be able to. How do you see past that? How do you not get caught up in that moment? What you're describing there, Dave, and this is what track coaches around the country do. You're describing leadership, and to me, it's one of the, I had this hypothesis. I was using Jerry Baltus up at Grand Valley, and I can't remember who the guest was, but I was like, you know what? I honestly think if Jerry was put, I don't know if Jerry knows anything about hockey, but I think if he was a head coach of a hockey team, like they would be really good. He may not know anything about the X's and O's of hockey, but he knows leadership. And what you made me think of the exact same thing. I'm like, oh man, if Dr. Dave was the head of a football team, maybe not at Oklahoma State, you got a good one there at Mike Gundy, but of some other, a chess club. We talked about chess. I was like, oh, I'm not sure Dave knows all the ins and outs of chess, but you know what? He would be able to explain to the team and lead the team to the best performance that they're going to give, because that's what good track coaches do. They're leaders first over the X's and O's. And that's not poo-pooing the X's and O's. That's important. That is just talking about what the leadership of this very diverse sport that we have and how important it is. And because at the end of the day, we're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. They need leadership.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a story without mentioning the coach or the school, but a very well-known coach, a future Hall of Fame coach. At one point in his career, the women's volleyball job came up. And they were doing a search, and this coach put his resume in for the women's, because the salary was far bigger than his. And people think, well, he's trying to make a point. Well, yes, but he puts his name in, and eventually the AD says, hey, what's this?
What are you doing?
I want to coach the volleyball team. And he says, well, what do you mean I coach the volleyball team? You don't know anything about volleyball. And he goes, I don't know anything about volleyball, but I know people and I know winning. I can figure out volleyball. And just like you're saying, I think that's true. And I think, this particular coach has a lot of stories like that, but he's, I think, an incredibly intelligent human being. And he had this conversation, and I think his point was made, and the guy was like, oh, your point's made, blah, blah, blah. And he's, no, I want to coach that team, and I'm the best coach for it, and I'll do it. And I want the salary. I want you to recognize, and whatever. He did not coach the volleyball team, but his point was what exactly you're saying, is that I know people and I know winning.
Yep. I suspected that person did not get the job, because we would all know who that person is immediately if that ever happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Like a bad cross-country runner, Dave, I'm off course. Let's get back on course, because really, honestly, what I'm so fascinated with our guest here on the podcast is the aha moment. So you mentioned after your first week of Texas Tech, you mentioned, I even wrote it down, like, oh, this is it. Like, and I'm paraphrasing now, but this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be. What was it about that first week? You're in Lubbock, Texas. Wes Kitley and crew, I love you. I've been to Lubbock a few times. Lubbock was the first place I ever saw a real, honest to God, tumbleweed.
Across the road.
I thought that was just the cartoon stuff, man. No. I took my JUCO team there for nationals, and I was like, oh my, this is real. I had no stinking clue. But you're in Lubbock as a cross-country coach, which I think in Lubbock is a little tougher because of the heat and things like that, where, you're not exactly in the quote unquote ideal place there in Stillwater either, but tough place there in Lubbock. What was it? What was that first week? What was that? This is it. Screw this doctor thing. Screw this Nobel thing. this right here, this is why I'm here?
I was super excited and happy every single day getting up, going into work. Couldn't wait to get there. Couldn't wait to get to the office. Couldn't wait to get to the track. I just would find myself just in my car. It was about a 4-mile drive to the track, kind of speed my way there. Just mind racing about what we were doing today, what was going to come next. And I thought, I never felt this way going to the lab. When I lived in Seattle, and I was beautiful place, great surroundings, where I grew up, mountains, trees, hiking, backpacking, outdoor things. I'd be driving in just like, oh God, I don't want to. Is there any way can I just call in? I should just call in sick and not go in today. And I thought, I don't want to live my life this way.
Mm-mm.
But when I was in Lubbock, and honestly, that first group of athletes I had, they weren't the most talented athletes, as you'd expect. They had a volunteer coach coaching the distance runners for a year. The previous women's coach had there was not necessarily a great breakup with the university. I think the general feeling around the distance team was kind of the morale wasn't great. And I think there hadn't been a lot of recruiting over the past few years. So there was a few good athletes, but in terms of the health of the program, it wasn't fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have one young lady on the team from right there in Lubbock, Lee Daniel, who hadn't become the Lee Daniel yet.
Yeah.
She was going into her junior year. But so I'm working with athletes that, number one, I was only 27 years old at the time, but I was definitely the best distance runner on the team. And, I was only, I was in pretty good shape. I was kind of doing some marathon training, and I was in pretty good shape, and I would run with the team and do workouts with some of the guys, kind of help lead. So it wasn't about, for me at that point, going and winning Big 12 titles or having kids make the national meet. That was something that, we're not making, no one's going to nationals.
Right.
Or there was no regionals then. It was a straight,
Right.
descending order list. Or even scoring a point at the conference meet. I knew that was far-fetched, at least on the men's side. But it was about seeing guys, men and women, who were excited about training, wanting to get better, committing to it, trying to see how good they could become. That was fun and exciting to me. And I wasn't a good coach at the time. I never coached before. And my attitude as kind of a blue-collar kid growing up was, the harder you work, the better you're going to be. And when I first started coaching, that's the way I coached. The same way I coached myself, same way my attitude, which probably was detrimental to my own career. And probably not great for some of those athletes, where we probably overtrained, as I think, honestly, even now, when I'm consciously trying to be conservative, we probably still overtrain, over race. I think most of the NCAA for distance runners were overtraining, over racing. We'd probably all do better if we had a better editing pen and we could just edit ourselves a little bit. But back then it was, I was far more aggressive with our training, and I've become more conservative every year since.
And when you were at Texas Tech, you had recent Gill podcast alum Deion Miller on staff. Yeah, he mentioned you, and that's what I learned, because I had no clue you were at Texas Tech, and I was like, I had no idea. Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned about training. I love how you said that editing pen. When I used to coach level ones and teach level ones and speak at clinics, I'd always say, hey, when you're write your workout, this ain't the 10 commandments. It's not set in stone here. It's really in pencil, depending on the day, weather, a lot of factors. What were you doing? This is your first on your own coaching job? I mean, you're not a volunteer somewhere and things like that. You are solely responsible here for these kids. And I love that I did not know you coach Leah Daniels. I'm obviously, again, not a distance runner or coach. And Leah Daniels, I know exactly. I mean, I remember this. She was amazing. What were you doing coaching education wise? And what I mean by that, both formally and or informally, meaning were you doing any back then? I think we still would have just had USATF and things like that. But more, maybe it's more informally. Were there coaches? Would you call back up Coach Stinzy and be like, hey, I'm thinking of this, or I'm having this issue? What were you doing to help yourself professional development wise?
I talked to Stinzy a little bit, but not as much. Again, Stinzy is a great guy, and but he's he's a little more formal in his relationships, and he was obviously busy with his own program. But I talked to Greg Metcalf a lot,
sure,
who was, one of my best friends in the world, still is. And the other guy was Jerry Schumacher, who He started at Wisconsin the same day I started at Texas Tech.
Right. Okay.
Jerry and I, the two people I talk to more than my wife are Jerry and Greg. And if they were females, my wife would be very concerned. So we'll be in bed at night. I'll get a phone call. I'll grab it and answer in the living room. Hey, we get in the living room. No, my wife knows it's either Jerry or Greg. So, but I talked to those guys a lot, and I talked to Dick Weiss, who was at Oklahoma State.
Oh, sure.
He was in the conference, and I would be when I went to meets. He was in his early 60s then, had a really good career at a place that was hard to have a great career at the time. And so, and if you ever talk to Dick Weiss, that guy can tell stories.
Yeah.
He remembers every split of every race down to the 10th of a second and can tell you in detail what happened. And, he was just a great guy to talk to and kind of pick his brain. And, I said, Coach, if I want to make it to nationals, what do I got to have? How many guys under 14-10 back then? Well, you get 5 guys under 14-10, you got a team going to nationals and cross, Now that's laughable. But back then you got 5 guys and he said, you might be top 10. And so, just picking his brain and kind of, him, Greg, Jerry, a few others, Jim Stinsey a little bit. But yeah, I had a very close knit group of people that I would talk to that were kind of helped me along.
Yeah, Dick Wheat's great guy. I coached in the same, when I was JUCO coach, same conference as his son. I think he was at Johnson County Community College, if I remember right.
County, yep.
Yeah, and I was down at Neosho. Yeah, that's right. So how long were you at Texas Tech, and how did it go? Kind of, your first, you're writing all the workouts now. How did that go during your time there?
Well, the first year was amazing. I had this group. I think the men were 12th out of 12, the Big 12. The women, I believe, were probably 11th. So that was rough. I remember at one point, at the conference meet, I had this big camera back then, this big SLR with a telephoto lens, because back then we had no sports media people. There was no online.
Right.
If we were going to have a presence, I needed pictures to show athletes of here's our athletes in motion, when I was recruiting. So I took this camera and I'd be out taking pictures. I remember maybe the last mile of the men's race. I had that big camera. I was wearing hiking boots. It was a wet, muddy day in Nebraska. And that's where the conference meet was. And I remember fast walking up a hill with this camera in my boots, talking to a couple of my guys as they were running and walking alongside them, saying, you got to get done. You got to move up. You're, I think, in 100th place. And there's 108 people to run. And we're running with, honestly, some of the Baylor guys who were quarter milers that Clyde Hart made me on the team. So we're running along with them. I'm thinking, man, we got a ways to go. So it went from there.
Did you take that as a challenge? Because, I'm always amazed at, we don't really see them in the moment, but you had a decision, a fork in the road right there. You could have been like, hey, these guys are just not good. They're not listening, whatever, blah, blah. I'm going to go to a different school or whatever. I'm going to get all new recruits, whatever. There's a lot of that. Or a coach can take hey, okay, if we put in another year or two, like there's potential here. I'm going to stick with these guys and these guys are going to stick with me. How did you decide that route? I mean, that's a little demoralizing, no matter who you are, what your past success, what your goals are. That's pretty, you're at the bottom here at this point. How did you choose to go the route you did?
Well, I had no past success at that point. So I had coached a club team in Seattle, a post-collegiate women's team, Club Northwest. And that women won the club nationals that year. And so that was my one venture into coaching where I'm writing workouts and doing my own thing. I was also at the same time volunteering with Washington, but so that was it. I didn't find it demoralizing. It wasn't that they didn't listen. They did listen. They weren't that talented. They were hardworking. They wanted to be great. I'm going to say one of their names because I don't think he'd mind. One of them, I'm still very close friends with to this day, Jesse Williams, who now owns Sound Running, does all that stuff. He founded the Brooks PR group. He was instrumental in the Brooks Hanson's group when he worked for Brooks. Jesse Williams is he's a major figure in kind of post-collegiate track and field right now with the meets he puts on. And
that's amazing.
Yeah. And so Jesse was one of those guys as a human being, loved the guy. He was not the most talented athlete. He worked his butt off like he does now. He is same thing. He's a blue collar kid. He grew up low income. He grew up struggling. Mom worked hard. And so I identified with him. So I wasn't disappointed in those guys. I was disappointed for them because like everybody else, they work hard, they dream big.
That's an
He
important
wanted
distinction.
to be a top 10 guy in the Big 12, but that wasn't gonna be his path. And he did improve and get better. And once he I think I coached him for 1 or a year and a half is all he had left. But he continued to run after college and became, kind of a pretty good long distance runner, marathoner, and did some pretty good things. In fact, when I was in grad school, he was living in Seattle, and we did some long tempo runs together at times. And sorry, it wasn't grad school. When I came back, when I was at Texas Tech, I would come back, or even Oklahoma State, come back to visit my parents. He was living in Seattle, and we'd get together and do long 20-mile tempo runs. And man, he'd give me everything I could handle. So, yeah. So anyway, guys like that, I wasn't disappointed. I was inspired. I was motivated.
Yeah.
I got to do better because whatever I did, we didn't run very well at the end of the year. And probably, like I said, we overtrained. Probably we got too aggressive. And I said, okay, here's a bunch of 1530 guys. Let's train like 1430 guys, be 1430 guys. Instead, I made them 16-minute guys, right? Because we just overdid it. I was just, it was, they did everything I told them to do. Probably I just shouldn't have been telling them to do what I was telling them to do.
Right.
And then I go from that to, we redshirt Lee Daniel that cross country season. And she comes into indoor, her PRs are about 17 minutes, about 36 minutes, and I think about 10 minutes in the 3K. And the first, we go run a 5K, and Joe Franklin lets me get her into the fast heat at the Cannon meet up in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And I've got splits written out in my head, and I'm with Greg Scholars, and she's in the race, and she's up in the front group. And my split chart, I'm like, what is this? Where is she? And Greg comes over to me and goes, hey, where is she? How'd she go? I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, look at your split chart. And I go, I got my split chart, but the splits don't make sense. I don't know if she's way ahead or way behind. I have no idea where she is. I can't even match the laps to the times. I go, I'm lost. And she ends up running 16:15 that day and wins. And it back then was the fastest time in the country. And goes into the NCAAs as one of the top 4 or 5 times in the country, and then wins the NCAA championship. Totally unexpected. And I think I'm a genius. This is easy. Jim Stinsy's never he's never had an individual title. He says to me, I've been coaching for 20 something years, whatever. I never had a title. You get one in 6 months. He goes, he kind of said that comment to me. And I was like, yes, because I'm a genius. I'm the best coach in the world.
Let me write you a letter. I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, let me tell you how you do things down at Texas Tech. And it turns out I was extremely lucky to have an incredibly talented woman who probably could have done 1,000 jumping jacks a day and won a national title, because it didn't matter what she was doing. She was ready to be great. And then we get to the outdoor season. She wins the 10K outdoor. And you might remember she's the one that lost her shoe. Yep. It took her about 30 seconds to get it back on.
That's right.
Comes back out of the track. She's 180 meters behind last place.
That's
comes back and wins. That was
amazing. Amazing.
So again, I thought, man, look at me. I'm gonna have titleists people win national titles every year. And that was in 99. And I didn't have another national champion until 2009. So it was a long dry spell after Lee Daniel. So yeah.
Wow. So Dave, what you're describing there, I've said this many times on the podcast, ego is not bad. Bad ego is bad. Yeah. And it feels like, I'm being a little judgy here, so you correct me where appropriate, but it feels like you're showing a lot of bad ego during this time.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're also describing it 20 years in the past, 20, 30 years in the past, where we have hindsight as well. So I'm not sure in the moment you could have thought, oh, I'm going to have a national title every year. That's a bad ego thing, right? Now you have experience, but
I thought this is not as hard as everybody thinks it is. And I'll tell you this, so we get to the national championships in Boise, and Lee is projected to be, she's got little faces in the crowd in Sports Illustrated and talking about the things. She went 32:53 that year at Stanford. And it was like, back then there was, whoa, someone just broke 33 minutes. And, blew my mind, blew everybody's mind. And so she comes in as one of the heavy favorites. And I remember looking up to Mark Wetmore and maybe it was Mike McGuire, Lance Harder.
Heavy hitters.
The heavy hitters. And we're all standing down there at the kind of by the steeple pit to watch the 10K. And I go and I kind of sidle up to those guys. And I'm like, hey guys,
this is where I belong.
Yeah. I'm in the club.
Right.
The gun goes off, and after about a lap, I see Lee running along, and Lee is so naive and knows so little about track and field and does so many bizarre things because her genuine naivety that all of a sudden she's running along. I see her talking to people on the infield, like the officials. I'm like, are you kidding me? She's like having conversations with, what is she doing? She comes back around the next time and she's looking over at me and she's talking and gesticulating, doing all these weird things. And she's pointing, I look down and, her foot's out of her shoe and she's holding it on. And in retrospect, I said, what were you doing when you were talking to officials? She was asking them to restart the race. She wanted them to stop the race 2 laps in because she lost her shoe and restart it, put her shoe back and let's restart.
Holy.
So again, her empty. She come to me and she goes, what do I do? And it flashed through my mind. I go, try to hold it on, kick it off and run barefoot, stop and put it back on, or drop out and come back in the 5K. Because she had the 5K as well.
Yeah, okay.
And I just say, okay, least offensive thing to do, stop and put it back on. And I figure it's 5 or 6 seconds at most. She's going to stop, reach down, pop it under her heel.
Right.
She stops, tries to pop it on her heel, can't get it. Then she squats down, is trying to untie it. I think she literally sits on the track and is like picking at the knots because she had it so tight, she couldn't get her foot back in. So she finally gets it untied, gets it back. I'm like, hey, Lee, gotta go. We gotta go. Hey, okay, get it tied. Let's go. She gets it tied. And now she's, like I said, about 30 seconds behind, not quite 200 meters. And I immediately start sidling away from the A team. Okay? All those guys, I'm like, I don't need to be near them. I need to be over here where the B team sits. Right? So I kind of went around to my own side by myself. I tell her, hey, you just got to be even. Don't be too aggressive. And she starts rolling off whatever. I think it was 78s. And we're a little bit of altitude. And she starts clicking off 78, 78, 78, being very, very patient. And at the front, for some reason, they kept running 82s. They just, if I had been someone coaching against Lee Daniel and her shoe comes off and I would have said, hey, we got to go. Let's just get this over with now.
Yeah.
And we might not beat everybody around us, but we're going to beat her. Well, they didn't. They just kind of stayed in the group. And by 5K, she's getting close. And there's a big crowd that stayed to watch the 10K. And this is in Boise, Idaho. And there starts to be this wave of applause following Lee because she's inching her way back. And each time she passes somebody who's gone off the pack, there's a clap for her. And this momentum and this energy is building. And as it's building, I'm coming back to the A team. I'm moving back over. And when she caught the back of the main pack, I thought, okay, good. Now sit in with these 12 or 13 women and just ride it. But as soon as she caught it, it was like this roar. And it's hard to describe that in a 10K you'd hear this, but there was. And she hears that, she bolts to the front. Like, oh no.
Oh, she's gonna be toast now, right? Yeah.
She goes to the front, she starts leading. And
how much is left in the race?
5K. Maybe 6, maybe 4K. It was right in the 5 to 6K range where she
still a major portion.
A long way to go.
Yeah.
And I remember it came down to Lee and Tara Roatinsky. And Tara is a phenomenal athlete from BYU.
Yeah, BYU, right.
Her niece is now one of BYU's top young runners. So it's kind of
cool. Yeah.
Kind of makes me feel old.
Yeah.
Now one of the best runners in the NCAA. But it's her and Tara, and I think, oh, Tara's got a kick. And Lee is not known for her speed. But with 600 to go, Lee really put the hammer down and ended up winning by 2 seconds. And I'm standing right in the middle of the A team again, looking around, going, hey, what do you think, boys? Hey, nice try. Better luck next time.
Dave, I've been in track for a long time. I almost said I'm famous for. I will routinely say I have never seen a good 10K race. The only 10K race that I've ever seen that's memorable to me is the Olympics when Galen and Mo. Yeah, I almost said Mevin. I knew that wasn't right. Mo. That was a phenomenal race. I remember being in my in-laws' house. I was like, oh, I was an American. And then Mo was just training me. It was just a great race. That was the only 10K. And I was at program. Yeah. I've been with Sue Parks at Eastern Michigan. She's had great 10Ks for our conference. And that, like I've had my own little rooting interest into it. And still, it's like, man, this 10K stuff is just too far on the track for me. That might be the greatest 10K story I've ever heard. And I knew it. I knew Leah. I knew Leah had won, and I knew I'd heard about the shoe thing. That was amazing. I can't imagine, like, it's all downhill for you there, brother. I mean, there's no better story than that right there.
Well, yeah. And so again, I watched this and it all of a sudden becomes, man, I'm pretty good at what I do. And again, now looking back as a coach with some seasoning to him, I think, man, she was phenomenal.
Yeah.
She was unbelievable. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing coaching. I tell my athletes now that she was a 36-minute 10K girl. And when I started coaching, I thought, okay, we need you to run 34 flat. So I got out there was a little book I used to have. You might remember all these computerized charts of paces. It was like, if you're going to a 13-15 person runs this pace for this, if you want miles, you're on this pace. You want quarters, you're on this pace. And it was just tables and tables and tables and tables. I got up that chart. I said, okay, what's a 34-minute girl need to do? And so we did that. And we trained her like a 34-minute girl. And what I didn't know is she was a 32-30 girl. So I'm undertraining her, but I think I'm overtraining her.
Right.
And while I'm undertraining her, when she runs her fast 10K, it turns out that all her workouts that we were doing to be fast were slower paced than her actual 10K pace. And she ran fantastic. She just did a fantastic year. And I look back at that now and I go, I made a mistake because I underestimated her. And I made a mistake because I was overtraining her. But my overtraining was actually undertraining because I underestimated. So I made all these mistakes that turned out to be really beneficial. At the same time, I had a guy named Michael Njenga, who was a Kenyan athlete who had just graduated from Texas Tech, but was finishing his degree. And he was a 29-40 guy. I thought the same thing. Let's run 29 minutes. Let's run 28-40. And so I'm having him, hey, Mike, you run with me. I'll do workouts with you. And you try to keep up with me. I'm a 29-20 guy. You try to keep up with me. So Mike's doing workouts with me. And he probably was like, I didn't know this. But we go run a 10K and he runs 27-40 and is neck and neck with Bob Kennedy's first real 10K and Culpepper. And he's leading those guys. He's wearing a white plain tank top, undershirt. That's his uniform because he's an unsponsored opinion guy. And the announcers think he's a rabbit because they don't know who he is. They the rabbit's going 4 miles. The rabbit's going 5. The rabbit's staying in there. He's leading those guys to a lap to go. And they end up running 27-30 high and he runs 27-42. But the same thing happened. I thought he was a 29-40 guy because that was his PR. And so I coach him like a 28-40 guy and he runs 27-40. And at the same time, I'm doing a lot of my workouts with some of the women. So I'm under training and I jumped a couple races and I go, how did I run that fast? I'm not training. And so my wheels started to turn like, maybe less is more. Maybe there's something to this. So that's when my whole kind of evolution towards being a little more conservative started.
Yeah.
By a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah. That's where, you can go to every class and I'm a huge proponent of coaches education. So this is not me poo-pooing coaches education. You go to every class, listen to every coach. A lot of times you got to get your hands dirty and make the mistakes. That's the experience is the thing that no one can speed up for you. No one can give it to you. You have to go in and make a mistake, find something that works and have that aha moment. That's what you're going through. I love that. That's amazing. So
I think young coaches ask me this all the time and they'll say, I'm afraid of making mistakes. I go, oh, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're going to make big ones. I go, it's the only way you're ever going to figure it out.
Yes.
You have to figure out who you are as a coach, what you believe in, because if you don't absolutely believe in what you're doing, your athletes won't either. And it's not going to work.
No,
you can't, I couldn't go take John McDonald's program and institute it here because it wouldn't be my belief. I couldn't take what Mark Wetmore did and institute it here or anybody else. I couldn't do what Bill Bowerman did because it wasn't what I believe. I had to go through my own experience, develop my own philosophy, get where I believe and do what I believe. Now, I used to publish all my workouts and hand them out at seminars I'd give and say, here's what we did exactly, pace by pace, day by day. And people say, well, you're not going to give out all your workouts. This is before Strava and when there was no secrets. Everybody kept their stuff secret. I go, I don't care if you have what I do every single day. It's not going to work for you because you're not going to believe in it and neither is your team. So, I don't care if you have, there's no secret formula.
We all have the same ingredients.
Yeah.
But there are certain chefs who can cook better than everybody else because they do things differently. We all have the same workouts. We all used to have access to the same physiology and biomechanics and biology, but there's certain coaches who put that into play differently. And to your point, that leadership and that knowing your athletes, knowing what works for you and your program that you've got to learn, you got to build. And it takes day by day, season by season. So how long at Texas Tech, and where to next, and why?
4 years at Texas Tech, and then I came here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So why?
Well,
Stillwater is a little bit like Lubbock.
Well, this program was heavily focused. In fact, back then it was pure distance running. They weren't fully funded.
Right, that's right.
When Dick Weiss called me, he was still head coach. He hired me as his assistant. They were fully funded. They were then fully funded, but they hadn't been. But I think the roster limit for the entire track team, I think we had 20 or 22. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Your number is 22. You can't go over.
Yep.
Well, with 22, you can't have a track team. There's just no way. You can barely have a cross country team because you need 5 to score. You need 5 to have a team. And if you have, you need 7 at the conference meet. Well, having 22, you need 22 because you have some kids redshirting, some kids hurt, some kids, have whatever issue. It's 22, 20 or whatever it was barely enough. So they were all distance. They told him, we don't care if you get a 19-foot vaulter. We're not having vault. We're not, that was kind of Coach Weiss's directive from the administration back then. And so as a distance coach, like you said, for me, Lubbock was a hard place to recruit to.
Sure.
Awfully hot. There weren't a lot of great places to go on a run or train. It was kind of running through the city streets, and it was difficult. And I tried to recruit the Northwest because I was familiar with the Northwest, and Northwest kids coming to Lubbock, Texas. It was a culture shock and a geographic shock to see it, and it was hard to sell that.
Yeah.
Also, we got a new head coach in Wes Kitley, who's obviously built a juggernaut at Texas Tech, and Wes's idea of where the program needed to go, there wasn't really a great place for me in that.
Yeah.
As being a distance coach, and he saw the program he has now. He saw that 20 years ago, and I thought you'll never have that, but he was right. He's got one of the best track programs in the country, and now has a facility that might be the best in the country. It's one of the best for sure.
Yep.
He has built an empire there that is his own kingdom. So, I think it just for a lot of reasons, Oklahoma State was really attractive to me. Coach Weiss had said, come in here, I'm going to work for 1 more year, and I'm going to retire. I'm going to hand it off to you, and you'll be head coach. So, I thought, and like I said, I had spent every meet where he was around, I'd just sit in the stands with him and kind of pick his brain. So we'd become pretty close, and, he was awesome, really good to me. He brought me in for a year. He did not retire in 1 year. 1 year became 2, became 3, became 4. I think he ended up staying 6 more years before he finally retired. But he gave me the head coaching title and head cross country coach in 2006. So 4 years into it, and 2 years later, he made me the head, or he retired, and I became the head track coach in 2008.
You said 06. Does that seem like a long time ago?
When I see some of the athletes I coached back then having kids that I'll soon be coaching, it seems like a long time ago. But in other respects, it feels like it was yesterday. Yeah. I think of the Ryan Vales and David Jankowski's and the Sean McCabe's and some of those guys I had back then. I think, how can they be 40 years old? That does not seem possible. Yeah. But that's where we are.
When you said 06, that's the year I got here to Gill. And I'd already had a coaching career, and I did the Vegas thing. And so when you said 06, I'm like, man, Dave, you've been at Oklahoma State forever. But when you said 06, I'm like, well, I feel like I just got here to Gill. That's why I was like, I wonder if that felt like long time for you. That's just amazing.
Depends on how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
Time passes the most for me in the growth of other people's children. Like someone will come to me and they had a baby, and I'll see them sometime and I go, what's your son, 3 or 4? 13. 13. What? Where is that time warp? So that's where time passes to me. It's in the growth of other people's kids.
Yeah. Well, speaking of growth, it's funny, the evolution of Oklahoma State track, because you mentioned, and I don't know if you did this on purpose, but you mentioned like they told Coach Weiss that even if you get a 19-foot vaulter, we ain't having it. Well, you had a really good vaulter in Joe Dial there at Oklahoma State.
We had several good vaulters. We had several world records. Joe Dial was a world record holder.
Great athlete. I mean, in all of them. I mean, there's some salty school records there at Oklahoma State before they made a decision to go a different route.
So I'm going to ask you a trivia question.
Uh-oh.
And you're going to know the answer, but I'm going to ask you two so you don't know the answer.
Okay.
Who in Oklahoma State track and field history, who has scored the most points at the national championships?
Man, I want to Yes, Joe, but I don't think that's the right name. It is Joe. Okay.
Joe
All
Dial.
right. All right. Good. All right. Joe Dial.
Who's
All right.
second?
Man, if you say Garth Brooks, because that's the only other name I think
No,
I know from back in the day, but he wasn't
Garth
that good.
Brooks.
Yeah, he wasn't that good. Yeah.
Nick Miller, who was a hammer thrower during my era.
No.
So everybody talks about our distance program.
Yeah.
But Joe Dial and Nick Miller, Joe Dial a vaulter, a one eventer, and Nick Miller, a hammer weight thrower, a one eventer, 1.5 eventer,
Yeah. Yeah.
are the two highest scoring athletes in school history at the
Today.
national championships. Yep.
No way.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I have to believe you. Of all people,
Yeah.
you're going to know. Yeah, that is totally shocking.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So speaking of growth, you were distance only, 20 something distance athletes. And now you've got, I mean, you've had some of the best sprinters around. You've had jumpers, vaulters, field of energy, had some great all around athletes. Talk to us about that growth of the program. How did it go from, hey, just be distance, have a good program, don't cause problems, we'll move on, to not only having a full program that's really good, but also having a distance program that went from good to great, if you will?
Well, I am a process similar to erosion. And you know, if you go out to the Grand Canyon, you look at it now, it's hard to imagine that at one time it was a drop of water on a high plain, right? And now it's this, over time, it becomes this incredible thing. And my program's kind of the same way. I work slowly, and we had 20 guys as our limit. And maybe one year I go to 22. And then I started saying, hey, if I have 14 in cross country, and then because each guy has to count in each sport they're in terms of title. If you give me 22, that's 66 counts over the course of the year. What if I only have 14 in cross country? Can I add 25 in indoor and 25 in outdoor? Yeah, okay, you can do that. And then I might fudge outdoor to 27. And I just slowly, over different administrators, kind of grew our numbers, and now no one talks to me about limits anymore. So it was a slow process. I think the first time we kind of stepped out of really spending our resources on middle or long distance runners was Nick Miller. I gave him a full scholarship, or what amounts to a full, as a hammer thrower. And the guy we took a chance on ended up being great. He was a national champion. He's now the British national record holder. He's a 3-time world championship athlete, and an Olympian, 2-time Olympian, and is phenomenal. But we took a chance on him, and then we got guys like Tyreek Hill, who came out from the football team. We signed took a chance on a long jumper from England, gave him a big scholarship. He ended up being, I think a 2 or 3-time first team All-American in long jump, jumped 802. I think he's now jumped 820 post collegiately. We got a guy who just walked onto the team, who ended up being one of the best sprinters in the country. John Teeters.
Teeters, yes. Okay, I actually could picture his face, because Diego was your coach back then.
Diego,
with
yeah.
Teeters, yeah. He was a walk-on.
Yeah, he was at Tulsa. He ran 10:30, and he wasn't getting much money there. And he was kind of a books guy there. You want to come here? We'll give you books. It's a hell of a lot cheaper because it's a state school.
Oh,
so
sure, private. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Yep, and went 652, I believe.
Teeters was a stud. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But 1091 windy and 1000, I think.
Yeah.
Legal.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys. So he started as a walk-on. He wasn't a walk-on for long.
How did you, so talking about this growth, it's one thing for the athletes, and those certainly help, but you are also, as the head coach, you're developing your coaching staff. You're allowed one more coach, and you got to convince a coach to come in. By the way, we've never had a sprint program, basically, so you're building from scratch, and we're in the Big 12, so it ain't easy. How are you working on developing your staff? How are you, what were the things that you were looking for in coaches to come and join you in this, because they got to be lock in step with how you're running the program?
Well, Mike Holder, who was my athletic director for a long time, just retired a couple of years ago, was a legendary golf coach here. Won 8 national titles as a golf coach. And I probably learned more about coaching from Mike Holder than from anybody else I've ever met. And just he and I kind of had a special relationship. We go on walks together all the time. We're both into getting our steps in. So we spend time walking, talking. And he always told me, and he's right, never hire a resume. Resumes don't coach. Just hire a human being. You'll be much better off. And so when I was hiring a sprints coach in 2013 for the first time in maybe 20 years or 25 years, they had a sprints coach here. You know, I hired Diego Flacker, and his resume, I mean, first of all, he'd been everywhere. He bounced around a lot. That's sometimes a red flag. He didn't necessarily have the credentials to say he can be the primary sprint coach in a Big 12 program yet. But when I talked to him, I liked his personality. I thought this is a guy I can spend time around. In fact, my interview with him, as I flew up to Drake to go to U.S. Nationals, and I made Diego drive me back to Lubbock in my car. Or not to Lubbock, sorry, to Stillwater. Diego drove me back to Stillwater. I said, Diego, your interview, I'm gonna come up there. I'm gonna drive up there. I'm gonna buy you a one-way ticket from Stillwater back to wherever he was, Auburn, I think.
Auburn, yeah.
But you're gonna drive me in my car back from Des Moines.
I love that. So, we literally, I think it was Jason from Catawba. When we're talking right now, Dave, it hasn't published, but when you're listening right now to our conversation with Dave, it has dropped. We literally brought that up. I said, hey, I think or was it Clifford Velto? We just talked about this where I said, hey, I personally think every interview for track coaches should be in a van ride, because you're going to be in a lot of van rides. So it shouldn't be in the office. We're never in the quote unquote, never in the office. We're driving, we're going somewhere, we're flying for this recruit, we're doing this meet. I love that. I did not, we had Diego on the podcast. I got to go back and listen and see if he brought that up. That's amazing.
We spent 8 hours in the car together. We got back to my office.
Could you imagine being on a job interview for 8 hours, and at hour 4, you're like, this ain't the guy, but I still got 4 hours to go.
Yeah. We were 8 hours in, and he got back, and he came in. I dropped off at the hotel. I came in the next day, and he came in all dressed up, and he popped out his PowerPoint, and I was like, Diego,
love it.
Put the PowerPoint away, because I don't care. I mean, there's nothing in your PowerPoint that's going to change me one way or the other. So just put it away. It's not a waste of time. He's like, but I've got all my coaching philosophy. I go, don't need it. I go, I talked to you. I listened to you. We sat in the car and just BS. We talked about track and field. We talked about the meet we just watched, performances. I hear your passion. You're a good dude. I can play this game with you, but I'm going to hire you. And so, So I've tried to hire people. My most recent hire was Anna Boyer Thorpe, who was one of my former athletes. And when I hired her, she had zero coaching experience. She didn't want to coach. She was married to one of her former teammates, one of the guys on my team that was on the team with her. They were living in Dallas. They both had careers, and they were doing this very quickly. And I called her and convinced her. And I called her, and I remember telling Mike Holder, my AD at the time, I said, hey, I'm going to catch some flack, and there's going to be some blowback about another coach hiring some young female who's got no experience, blah, blah, blah. And he said, what did I tell you? What have I always told you? Who cares about the resume? The resume isn't going to do anything. Is she a great person? I said, you're going to meet her. And he said, he talked to her for about 20 minutes. He said, hire that woman, get her here. And honestly, I could not have hired a better person for that position. That's one of the best hires I've ever made, if not the best. She's become a great coach, but she's always been a fantastic human being. The way she interacts with people, the way she lights up a room, she makes other people feel, she makes other people believe. Just what she can do as a human being is, and also I come into the office, I go into her office, I lay down on her couch, and I start my therapy session. So
hire a person, not a resume. That's really that's solid advice right there. Yeah, I love that.
We had one coach in here on an interview for another position. Again, I won't say the coach, but that coach said, hey, you can call my AD, you can call this AD, my former AD, and Mike Holder at the time. Why would I call those people? They're like, well, they can tell you. But he goes, you think they're going to tell me anything valuable, good or bad? You think I'm going to trust anything they say, good or bad? I've looked you in the eye. I formed an opinion of you. Right. I think what I think about you, and no one's going to change it. Right? It doesn't matter what your current AD or your past AD is going to say about you, good or bad. I don't care. If you want me to call them, I will, but it's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah. Hey, this is great. This is great advice. And if you're listening and getting value from this, I'd also recommend, we had Jamie Pollard, the AD of Iowa State,
Great
on
AD.
podcast. Yeah. And I asked him point blank, I go, hey, so you've hired many head coaches and have been involved in the assistant coaching for track and field processes. Someone's listening right now. What do they need to know from an AD's perspective to get a head job like this? And he laid it out for us. So go back and
I should go listen to the podcast, but I probably won't. So what did he say?
Yeah. That was a long time ago. 200 interviews. I knew you were going to say that, Dave. It was really great advice. I don't want to spoil it, so everybody else will go listen to it, but he was really good. It really was about, if I remember right, someone's going to correct me on Twitter here. A lot of it was passion. Like, you got to know what the job, like, we're in the Big 12 here. There is no playing around here. You better know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, I think he said it, I don't know if this is a direct quote, but I think at the end of the day, he said, at the end of the day, it's a people business. So not only do you need to know how to coach the kids and deal with them and their parents and things like that, he goes, but you're dealing with a lot of people in an athletic department, marketing, SID, compliance, et cetera. So you better know how to work with people at the end of the day. So I really enjoyed his time. So talk to us about, you mentioned earlier that it's more fun and maybe more satisfying to win the first one, and it's harder and maybe a little bit less satisfying to win 2, 3, 4, whatever, etc. So talk to us. What was the first national title, and what did that mean to you?
I'll honestly say the second one was more fun.
Okay.
The first one, it was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of feeling like here's our window and it's closing. We better get this done, because Ryan Vale's graduating, John Kowski's graduating. The guys are gonna get this done for me that have been kind of the heart and soul. They're gone. I've got all these other schleps I'm gonna have to count on next year, right? And so it was going into it with a lot of anxiety and stress, and thinking that I hear this from coaches who have won titles in other sports all the time. I listen to this, and it's very true that you're striving for this thing. And I think athletes experience the same thing. This thing you think you want, this ultimate goal, the place you want to be, the top of the mountain, whatever it is. And you work so hard for it. And we got it that first year. Also, part of what shaped this was the race itself. We were ahead of Oregon by a significant margin at about 5K. And that lead kept shrinking. We were hemorrhaging points all the way, mainly because German Fernandez, who was our 5th year, unbeknownst to us, was anemic, and he was just sliding at the end. And German Fernandez is one of the, not one of, he's the most talented athlete I've ever worked with.
Phenomenal, yeah.
And watching him go from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s to the 60s and thinking, can we win with a 5th man at 100th place? And he ended up being 99th. I think we ended up winning by 16 points. When that got done, I just remember going, oh, I want to celebrate. I want to be excited. I'm exhausted. Yeah. I'm like, it was kind of just relief. It wasn't the moment I thought it'd be. It didn't fill me up. It didn't make the world change. You know, nothing was different from the day before, except for now I got to try to figure out how to do it again.
So notice the difference, Dave, in words that you're using and even your body language. You just won the national title. No one does that. I mean, you can probably count on 2 hands, me and your hands together, how many coaches today that are coaching that have won a national title in cross, right? It just doesn't happen a lot, right? And go back to when Leah won, and when the next kid went 27, and you were, I'm gussing up. I'm in the A group. Look, your ego is different. Your confidence in yourself is different now as well. It's not based on necessarily what the kids on the track do. It's you and as a person, and here's my profession. It's different. I'm just noticing again the language and body language here.
Well, in my early coaching career, I had 0 to lose. There was 0 expectation. Going into that year, or even in February of that year, I had no clue that Lee Daniel could even make a national championship, let alone win one or 2. And then she won the gold medal at the World University Games that year. Right. So I had no idea what was coming. Had I thought that was a possibility, it might have changed everything. Because now all of a sudden you start to again worry about screwing it up or losing something. There's something you can lose.
You're talking about expectations.
Yeah. Expectations, and just again, like I said, going into this 2009 year, the year we're now, I've changed a lot since 2009 as well. Yeah, sure. I've evolved as a coach and what I expect. So that was a lifetime. But in 2009, I remember finishing, and like I said, not having this big euphoric rush of, whatever. It was more just, oh, thank God. We got it done. It's over. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. I'm going to Hawaii, which I did. And
wow.
yeah. So, I think that first one was tough. The next one, everybody graduated. Going into the year, I didn't really think we were going to win again. I was rebuilding the team, or I thought I was rebuilding. I had a bunch of young guys. And it was a lot more fun. When we won that one, it was fun. Partly because at 5K, I remember watching them come. We were at Terre Haute. I was at the 6K mark. We look across the valley, and you can see them coming down that long hill, went from 5K to 6K. I remember sticking my fist in the air, going. Actually, I said Stubbs, who was our fifth man. I was like, Stubbs! Because I saw Stubbs flying down, just eating people up. I thought, this race, it's over. I told Bobby Lockhart, my sister, let's go to the finish line. We don't need to be anyplace else. Let's go to the finish line and celebrate this. And I could just see, I knew my team. I knew they weren't giving up places in the last 5K, and we were just mowing people down. And like I said, we won by 120 points that year. So, so that one was different. It was a different feel. From that point forward, 2011, we lost. That was a stressful year. It was, how do we stay on top? 2012, we came back and won again. In 2013, again, I thought we had the team to win. We returned a core group of guys that was good enough to win. But again, we kind of didn't have that same edge. We didn't have that same killer instinct. Everybody's looking at someone else to get the job done, and we got third. And then we went on the slide, 3rd, 9th, 18th, back to 12th, 29th, back to 13th, did not qualify. And then third, tie for first. I'm not going to say second. I'm going to say tie for first.
Oh yeah, that's right. I just remembered that. I don't know if I'll call it a controversy. It was the rule, or it is the rule. So
it is the rule.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into it, because I'm going to say this and you correct me. It is the rule. So what he's talking about here, explain a little bit. So the top 5, the team scores were tied at the end of the day. Most people probably assume that in cross country, because it is like this in other places, maybe high school and stuff, the 6th place, whoever has the best 6th place runner then becomes first place. That's the tiebreaker. Is if your 6th runner was 100th and their 6th runner was 120th, you win first, they get second because of that. But in NCAA, and I don't know if it's all divisions or if it's just specific to Division 1, it is they do basically a one-on-one count, right? So we look at where did the first person on each team's runner get. So your first runner was 3rd and theirs was 5th, you get a point because your first guy matched up to theirs, right? And second, and it goes all, and whoever gets the 3 first, because 3 out of 5, and that's how you won. So boy, you're gonna get mad at me. You got second as a team because of that rule. I understand why you're saying tie for first. And there were a lot of people upset. I'm on social media every day, all day. So I read all of the posts, and there's a lot of validation of why people would be upset. And I understand why you would maybe be upset. But at the end of the day, is it true? I'm going to say you, meaning you, the general body of NCAA cross country coaches, you voted for this.
Probably, but that's not who changed the rule.
Oh, okay.
Because coaches don't change these rules. The NCAA does.
Right.
It comes down to the NCAA committee.
Right.
And I may have been on the committee when this changed. I can't remember.
Sure.
First of all, in all honesty, I'm not upset about it because I knew the rule.
That's a good correction.
Mike Smith knew the rule.
Yeah.
Everybody in the country knew the rule. Well, not everybody. People who were tuned in.
Yeah. So not everybody.
Do I necessarily like the rule or see it as being a great way to break ties?
That's fair. Yeah.
But going in, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, I have had 3 championships now decided by this tiebreaker rule.
No way.
2 of them I've lost and 1 of them I've won. I think we're the only school. We 3 years ago, we won a conference title against Iowa State. Martin Smith's last year. We beat them at the conference meet on this tiebreaker rule. They were the better team. And I walked away thinking, I'm not giving this trophy back because we need it. They've won 3 in a row. We need to take this back. But it was hollow to me because their 6th and 7th beat our 6th. So I look at them like they were the more complete team. And people could say, well, you just ran better than they did in the day. We didn't run better. We scored the same thing they scored, right? But we got the title because of this weird rule. But their 6th and 7th runners were better than our 6th.
Right.
To me, if you're looking at who's got the better, more complete team, they do. At the regional meet this year, we lost to Tulsa on this tiebreaker.
Oh,
and then at Nationals, we lost the Nationals to Northern Arizona on this tiebreaker. So
you've been involved in more of these than anybody else in this country. Holy cow.
Yes. So I was very aware of how this tiebreaker works. So it wasn't like, but I'll tell you this, in most systems of our tiebreaker, you are going to make coaching decisions that might affect the tie. How part of what you do is okay, but there's nothing I or Mike Smith or Ed Eyestone or anybody else would do differently. What's my tiebreaker? To me, this tiebreaker is like a coin flip. And someone could say, well, you got the title at that conference championship against Iowa State because you just ran a little bit better. We didn't run better. We scored. To me, this is the only tiebreaker in any sport anywhere in the world that I know of that breaks a tie based on no new information. You take the same result that's already given you a tie and said, we're going to look at it in a different way and say it's not a tie. But if we're saying it's, if we're saying this is the way we score a championship, it's a tie, you can't look at the same result with nothing new and now say it's not a tie. And so to me, that's what's weird about it. I think it'd be like saying in basketball, we're not going to play overtime. We're going to say, okay, your top scorer scored 20 points, ours scored 19. We win that battle. And go through, okay, there's nothing that's, if I would have known that, I would have my top guy score more.
You might have
spreading it around.
That's
not the way we play.
You might have changed my mind on this. Because I was looking at it as, your 6th and 7th runners are on the team, but top 5 is what we score. In football, we don't go and say, well, what was the kick returners yardage or the backup quarterback's yard? He's part of the team and they were instrumental in the win or what happened, but we don't go and look at their results. But in that example you just gave, I started thinking about football, 4 quarters. We don't go and look at, well, in the first quarter, you scored 14, they scored 0, point to you. That's a good point.
You're taking no information. Everybody else plays overtime, extra innings. Golf goes to the 5th man. Cross country, everywhere else goes to the 5th or 6th man, depending on the league.
Right.
Everybody goes to another man or another spot, or you play extra time. Even in soccer, which a lot of people think penalty kicks are stupid and they don't have anything to do with the game. I kind of agree, but at least there's new information.
Right. There's something going on. Right.
There's some information. So to me, that makes it weird. And I tell people this, you could run a dual meet with a team where you tie and your 6th man beats their 6th and your 7th man beats their 6th and 7th, but you still lose the tiebreaker. And it's a dual meet. You've already said it's a tie. Now you're just going to say, well, this head-to-head thing, it takes in no one new information. To me, that's just odd.
So what would you, because I heard the argument of, and I kind of see both ways on this one about the 6-man tiebreaker of, well, what if you only have 5 people? I mean, because that's still a team, by the way. So, but other people are like, well, that shows you didn't have your depth either. But I'm also like, but the team is 5. if I put 11 people on the football field, I don't need a second string. I probably do, but you know what I'm saying? I could just have those 11 and win. So what would you, if you could,
I would argue to you, the team is not 5, the team is 7.
But you only score 5.
You score 5, but 7 play.
You score
7
5.
have the opportunities.
You score 5. You score 5 out of those 7.
Yeah,
I got you.
Right.
So what would you think? Magic wand? How would you tie break? 6 runner, 5th runner. I like the 5th runner.
I don't know. Saying, I'm just going to say that in 99.99% of races of consequence, a team's not going to only have 5 finishers. I mean, it happens every once in a while. But a team vying for the title doesn't usually do it with 5. I can't remember a time when a major championship's been won with 5 finishers. So you might be breaking the tie at 15th and 16th in the region in that and think, well, this team doesn't have a 5th man. Well, okay, it's kind of inconsequential at that point.
Right.
So I think it's much more rare. And honestly, like you said, I don't know that that's a problem because I don't think any team's going to start with fewer than 7. They may finish with fewer than 7.
Correct.
But they're probably going to start with 7.
That's probably more apt, right? Mm-hmm.
If you're that level, you're gonna put somebody in there thinking, God, just in case if something goes wrong, we got to have a finisher.
You can put some 400-meter runner guys in there.
Basketball, you can play with 4, right? You have to have 4 on the floor, but you can play with 4.
Mm-hmm.
but fives would normally play, but you can play with 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the, 6-man, I think, is probably what I would use if I broke a tie. The last time there was a tie at the NCAA championships in cross country, it was a tie. There was co-national champions.
Oh, right.
And that was, I think, 1942. And so, in track, if we have a tie, it's a tie.
Yeah. I was going to say, what's wrong with that? Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have co-national champions. In wrestling, if you have a tie, it's a tie. There's co-national champions. So I get breaking. If you can play overtime, I get it. If we could go line up and say, hey, we're going to run every lineup, we're going to run 2 more K.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
that's
God.
A better way.
Oh, God.
That's a better way. Right? 30 minutes, we're going again. How cool would that be?
That'd be crazy.
So I get the argument against the 6-man.
Mm-hmm.
Some people make that argument that it doesn't make sense. Well, maybe not. If you're only scoring 5 and we have equal 5s, then maybe it's just a tie. I just think that the system we use now doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily pick the team who ran better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
By definition, it's not. We tied. We came through with the exact same score. How did they run better?
What about average time?
I don't get that either. I don't think that's valuable.
Yeah.
Because, one guy winning by a minute changes everything. And you might pound them soundly at 2, 3, 4 and be 5 and 6 and 7.
Right.
But, I don't know if that's valuable either.
Yeah.
What you really want to, if you're going to break the tie, you want to say, because of this,
mm-hmm.
this team is better.
Mm-hmm.
And not be a coin flip,
mm-hmm.
which I kind of think our current system is almost a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, when we finished and I saw it was a tie, I kind of quickly go through okay, they had 1 and 2, so they beat us there for sure. I know we got 3 because Florida was 12. I was trying to think, oh God, we beat them at 5, but we have the same score. That means they had to have beat, because it was like a couple points here and there, right? They went 2, 3, we went 5, 8, 12.
Right.
They were 18, and oh God, yeah, they had to have beaten us but it was like a coin flip. It was like we could have beaten them up, could have flipped,
You might have changed minds by what you said about the no new information thing. That I think that's key to maybe that argument there. Honestly, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, we do an overtime in football. We don't just go back and look at this. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, let's keep moving on for the sense of time. No one expected me to talk that much about cross country and cross country ties, but we're going to keep going cross country because one of the cool things you have there at Oklahoma State is this cross country course. I haven't been there. Our CEO here, actually, his son runs for Baylor. And so he's been on your course several times. And he came back, actually, he asked me, hey, have you been on Oklahoma State's campus? And I said, yeah, I have. He goes, their cross country course. And I was like, I don't think they had it when I was there. But tell us about this cross country course and what kind of advantages that give you. Not necessarily, I know you've hosted nationals, and I want to talk about that briefly as well, but having a home for your cross country team, that's different. We all have a track for our track team. Most of us have a track for our track team. Talk to us about your cross country course. How did that come into involvement? I know a little bit of the history of Wisconsin's cross country course because I'm now friends with Z, the guy who Zimmerman, who designed it. He's a great friend of mine now. Talk to us about your cross country course because it's first class, my friend. It's awesome.
No offense to Wisconsin, but it's the best cross country course in the country.
No, man. I stay with Zim when I go up there. I'm going to tell him that. I'm going to tell him
Tom.
that. All right.
Sorry, Tom. Ours is it's the widest. It's 33 feet wide throughout. The narrowest point is 33 feet.
Okay.
It's irrigated. The entire thing is irrigated, so it's got fairway quality grass the entire way through.
Wow.
Yeah. The start is 900 meters before the first team turn, a 900-meter straightaway. I think it's challenging. It's got nuance to it. There is a strategy to how you run it. Everybody has a different strategy on how to play it. It's like a good golf course. It plays different than other golf courses. And I think it's beneficial to kind of come up with a strategy and know what you're doing. And you might have a good one or a bad one, but there's a strategy and a nuance to it. It's on campus. So it's literally 600 meters as the crow flies from where the freshmen stay, about 400 meters from our track,
Oh yeah.
It's right there. We can get to it every day in a 2-minute jog.
Oh, that's cool.
So we can go up to it. And so I think for all those reasons, I've never seen anything like it in the world. And it came about, it's the course we've had for the last 70 years. But maybe 10 years ago, we wanted to host nationals, and we had a course that wasn't by now, today, it wouldn't be able to host nationals.
Mhm.
Then we might have been able to fudge it, but it was too narrow. It was down to 3 or 4 meters in places, and the footing wasn't great, and you had to run through piles of bark chips because we have hills that would wash out, so we just always cover in bark chips. There was probably over the years, 2 or 3 feet of bark chips piled up. So it was what I got was a very spongy, hard place to run. But it was a great course. It was through the woods and up and down through the ravine, very challenging. And so we put in a bid to host nationals, and the NCAA committee asked me, so tell us about your course. And I just told them about the course I wanted instead of the course we had. And I was honest. I said, hey, listen, it's not there right now, but it will be. We got a plan. We're gonna build this course, and we got the bid. And so I went straight upstairs to my AD, Mike Holder, same AD, said, hey, we got the bid. We have to make some improvements.
Good news, bad news.
Yeah. So what we got to do? And I told him, and I had a plan to spend maybe up to $1 million to kind of redo it. And he said, you're not dreaming big enough. You got to dream bigger. He goes, we got to do, we could have been a national championship course.
Shout out Mike Holder. Come on, administration, Mr. AD. Thank you.
So I think he ended up spending about $5 million on it when it was all said and done. And we're still going.
Love it.
If you take the value of the land on top of that, we're, well into the 20s, maybe in the 30s in terms of so it is the most expensive cross-country course in the world. I have zero doubt of that. And like I said, we irrigate it. Water's expensive. We irrigate it all year long. Keep this Bermuda grass growing.
Yeah.
It's maintained like a fairway. We're continually improving. We spend, a couple $100,000 more on it every year to kind of keep it, make it better than the last year. We're going to keep going with that, kind of keep improving it. So it's now, it's this fantastic thing. It's a gem of a course. Awesome. I think I tell track athletes, the kids we recruit, usually facilities aren't going to make a difference. Someone could say, we got this locker room, we got this dorm, we got this track, we got this hot tub. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's not really a benefit, because if you got a track and you got a long jump runway and they're in good shape, it's kind of the same. Sure. This cross country course, I think, is a game changer because of the soft surface, running on grass, being able to get on hills, being right there on campus, having this place you can go and do. We do our 10-mile tempo runs on our cross country course. We used to go out to the dirt roads. The roads are rocky in places, they're rutted, they're great, but this is like, 10 times better. So I think in many ways, this can lead to, building better distance runners just by having this facility. Well, I think it also just demonstrates the commitment that Oklahoma State University
100%
has to cross country. If you're willing to tie up this 120 acres on campus and to spend this money to make it an elite cross country course, well, you think highly of this sport.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We talk a lot about in our sport of, we're a poor sport. We don't have budgets and things like that, and we can't get the money. And all of that's true. We don't have big enough budgets, not only for travel, equipment, et cetera, but also for our salaries, for our coaches, things like that. But it's not that we don't have the money in athletic departments. We don't have the priority for track and cross country overall. And as you were explaining that, and that's why I said, shout out to Mike Holder. I was like, oh, Mike realized, my priority for cross country and track is higher than other places. And so we are going to spend the money into that. I think that's just what a fantastic example of an administrator that cares about the athletic department and not just specific sports. You can pick those sports out, by the way. I love that. What a great example. Hey, we're getting close to time. Just a couple more questions. Are you good or?
Yeah,
okay, great. So talk to us about hosting nationals. A lot of people think that's awesome to host a national championship. And there's a lot of, home field advantage and all those kind of things, all that kind of stuff. But as a coaching staff, I just can't imagine the amount of work that you have to do and your staff has to do and your athletic department has to do to make it a successful championship. Talk to us about the workload and the stresses, and on top of your kids are trying to perform as well, about hosting a national championship.
Well, first of all, I have a assistant athletic director, Stacy Stanish, who oversees. She's the meet director for us. She is absolutely phenomenal. And then the people around her, Ben Dyson, who's one of our compliance directors, who was with her, Lisa Fisher, one of our head facilities people and events people. They took all of that off of me. I didn't have to do
Oh,
much.
sweet.
But you need to imagine hosting a gigantic party with the most important people and the people you respect most in your life at your house. And now assume they're all home decorators, caterers, and event planners. And they're coming into your house. And you all of a sudden start to see all the flaws and you want to clean them up and fix them. And you're just nervous about how they're going to feel about the way you hosted the party because they're party planners, and the way your house looks because they're interior decorators. And you want to impress them. So I brought all the people I respect most, my closest friends, the one people I love, these cross-country coaches, into my house and said, what do you think? And you feel vulnerable. You're laying yourself open. You're just terrified someone's going to say, well, it's nice, but you're terrified about that happening. So the stress was immense, and probably because of that, the expectation and the perfection I expected out of Stacy and those working with her was probably unfair to them. But like I would see a blade of grass out of place or a little cut mark and I go to our groundskeeper, Tracy Schneierwitz, who's also awesome. We have a full-time, you basically is a golf course administrator who now runs that's his job. He runs our cross country course and maintains it. It's his full-time job.
Wow.
I go to him and go, Tracy, there's a dead spot here. And it'd be like a patch of grass this big, it's dead. They go, well, Coach, this is you know how many acres of grass we're managing?
Did you see all of this?
Yeah. And I don't see it. Yeah. I see the dead spot. I go, we got to get that fixed. We got to grass growing there in the next 2 months. It's gonna be green, well, Parmesan yellow by the time Nationals gets here because we have Bermuda, but it's got to be covered up. And so I probably drove them crazy, but it's just because I knew I was bringing in the people I love and respect the most. All my peers, all my colleagues, the people I look up to are coming in to my house. I want it to be immaculate.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it as far as like you're hosting the party. Oh, and by the way, all the people you're hosting are party planners. Yeah, they all have their own courses, or at least have their own mind of what they want to course one day. And oh, by the way, and there's so many intangibles that you have no control over, the weather and whatever, et cetera. And it's like, oh, Dave, how could you have this? It's raining. It's like, I didn't order that. It just happened. Yeah, that's
thankfully the feedback we got from coaches, the NCAA, media, athletes was phenomenal. I think the most important thing to me is how does the course run and how is it for athletes? Mm-hmm. This is their thing. Like you said, we're a service industry and our customers are the athletes. Right. We are here for them. What do they think? That was the most important thing. Then there's the other things like what's the meet day presentation look like? What's the overall experience like? What's the town like? What's the surrounding days like? And those become less and less important to me as we get further out. They're important, but to me, it's on race day, in the race, what's it like for the student athletes? And I think we got really high marks for that. And that's what was most important to me. And we had one or two people that kind of, had a little, they had some, complaints, but okay. Overall, it was very good. So we got done with it. I was like, we did do a good job and our house is okay. And, people are impressed. And so it was a sigh of relief. In 2020, we hosted, but it was during COVID. We were under much different circumstances, much different budget. Yeah. We were not allowed to have fans. At the last minute, we were allowed to have fans, but we got to create this double wall of bike racks everywhere the athletes can be to keep them 6 feet away from fans. And it made our place look like a prison. It didn't look like a championship course. It looked like you were in prison because there's all these fence walls everywhere. And I remember seeing that going, this doesn't look like a championship experience. But the second time around, much different experience. And I think it was fantastic.
Well, let's talk about it because that was one of the last two questions I have here. You brought up COVID. And this came up in an earlier podcast episode as well. We did something pretty radical that year. Instead of cross country being in November, it was in March, a week after indoor nationals. Is that correct?
3 days.
3 days.
It was on Monday following the Saturday conclusion.
So called the same weekend. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Indoor nationals is over on Saturday and Monday you have the race. That's right. Because nationals was in Arkansas, I think. Because I remember it was close. Yeah. Okay. Now I thought that was fantastic. Outsider here, right? For a couple of reasons. One, I was so, and we had a forced break because of COVID, but I thought, man, our distance coaches, our track coaches in general, but our distance coaches, you have a competitive season in the fall, you have an indoor season, you have an outdoor season. Outdoor season in sometime in June, could go later because of different national meets. And by the way, July 1 starts senior recruiting. So you're right back into it. Your kids are right back into cross country. There is no day. There are no days off. Literally, there are no days off when you count recruiting trips, etc. And I hate that. Like I just dislike that at all. I want Dave Smith to be Dave Smith, whose job is coaching track and field and cross country, not Dave's all-consuming identity and 24/7 is coaching track and field. So when they moved it to call it the week of indoor nationals, I was like, oh man, you got a fall. Like you could go to football games, you can go to your sons or daughters' soccer games and cross country meets and things like that. And it kind of lined up, if I know international cross country a little bit, that's kind of more of an international like marches, like when Worlds and things like that are. And I thought, and it went really well. Again, outsider. Indoor nationals didn't feel like there was anything being lost at the competition level there. Cross country nationals at your place, even though it unfortunately had bike racks everywhere, seemed like that was still a very competitive, and the quote unquote right team won and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, this is going to be one of the positives that comes out of COVID. Like people are going to bark like, hey man, I actually had a life in the fall. I got to do my lawn in the fall. Let's keep this going. And it didn't. Talk to us about not necessarily why it didn't, but could or should we do this? And I mean more for the mental health of our coaches, the physical health of our coaches, everything else that is important, so that Dave, that you can coach until you are 60 or 70, however old you decide you want to be, not I get out early because I'm just burnt out and things like that. Talk to us about that a little bit here.
Well, you sound like you've been talking to Ben Lanana, because I wish he kind of feels the same way you do. I think he liked that scenario. I didn't like it.
Okay.
I think June to March is a long time to go without a major competition for athletes who are venturing around. I also thought the national meet, not to take away from what we did, we got third that year, but it was diluted. We had teams that went all in on track. Oregon, for example, they went to the track nationals. They didn't send a team. They would have qualified. They would have been selected. They didn't even submit their team for selection. Right. Same with the University of Texas. They had a team that probably would have been selected, but they went all in on the indoor track nationals and said, we're not going to consider cross country. We had other teams like Arkansas that said, we're going to go all in on track, and then we're going to drive over. We're going to go all in on cross country. And Arkansas did that and finished. I don't remember what they got indoors. We got fourth in cross. They got fourth here. And then we had teams like our men's team, NAU and BYU, that said, yeah, we've got these qualifiers in indoor track. We're not going to take them. We're going to go all in on cross country. So both meets got diluted a little bit. And I didn't like that. And I think that if you have an indoor track season where it is and a cross country season where it is, you're going to force us into that conversation every year about what do we do with our distance runners? Do they run indoor track or cross country? Because it's awfully difficult to do both.
So there was a similar argument that I remember occurring when Division I outdoor went to a 4-day meet that alternated women on, call it Thursday and Saturday, and men on Wednesday, Thursday. The argument was, well, we're forced into less doubles because there's, the meet's condensed because it's call it a 3-hour window. And I don't think that's hurt outdoor championships, right? I mean, that's one of the most amazing meets in the world. We've had to coach differently, maybe less doubles, or, a kid doesn't get on a relay or something because they have to do the 1-2 in the long or something like that, or God knows what, crazy distance runners with your doubles are just amazing, actually. So would this just cause us to coach differently? We would have a different cross-country team as an indoor team, maybe.
You would, but remember who we're talking about. This is for student athletes. And ultimately, for most of them, it's not about their Olympic career, right, or their pro career.
That's correct.
It's about their collegiate career. And it's about what is fun. What do you want to do? What inspires you? What excites you? What sounds fun to you? These kids want to run indoor track because it's fun. They want to run across country and have a chance to get a title because it's fun. So if you force them in a situation where we're saying, hey, they're 2 days apart, we can't do both, you got to pick one, we're taking away from their experience. And yes, it's exhausting for them. And we can be paternalistic and say, in your best interest, we think you should do one or the other, but screw that. This is what they enjoy, right? This is what's fun for them, right? And there's certain athletes, I would say, you've got a career that could go well beyond your days at OSU. So we need to manage this very carefully.
Right.
We can't do everything that seems fun. But ultimately, I tell my recruits, my athletes, this all the time. Each athlete in our program has to be the captain of his or her own ship. And as the captain, you have to decide where the ship is going. And then our job as coaches is to be the navigator. And once you tell us where we're going, we'll show you the route. And the route's not going to always make sense to you. And sometimes we're not going to be able to do every fun thing to the destination. But if you want to get to the destination, we're going to give you the best route to the destination. You can have a different, some of you might want to be Olympians or pros or NCAA champions, or I want to max out my experience at the, I want to run everything. I want to go to this meet. Whatever your destination is, we will cater your experience to that destination. But ultimately, they have to be able to decide what's fun. I think if you told most of these distance runners, if I told Alex Mayer, hey, you can run cross or indoor, he's going to be disappointed in that scenario. Yeah. He loves cross country and running with his team. He went 13-11 indoors this year. He loved it. Okay. He ran 2 events at the indoor meet, and he's a senior. I don't usually let kids double, but I let him do it. And because it was fun to him and he wanted to do it. And, since then it's taken him a while to kind of recover. He's been a little tired. And I think, man, what was best for him is probably not to double run one event, but at some point I got to not be kind of this paternalistic, I'm going to guide and protect you from everything. You got to let kids, my AD again, Mike Holder, he told me once, he goes, look, if I got to the national tournament in golf, I'd be walking around with some golfer, we'd be on the tee, and he pulls out the 3 wood or the 3 iron. I'd say, what are you doing? So I'm going to lay up, coach. He goes, lay up? Get the driver. We didn't come all the way across the country to lay up. Take your driver and swing. Let's see if you can hit, let's see if you can carry the water. And he goes, sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. Well, let's go for it. That's why we're here. It's to see how good we can be, not how safe we can play it. And, my strategy, I'm getting off topic. My strategy in races has always been very conservative. Mike Holder has made me much more aggressive with my teams. Those conversations like, you know what? We didn't come here to lay up. We're here to swing for the green. And I think sometimes kids want to swing for the green. They can't do it all the time. You got to pull the reins back a little bit. But I worry that if we go to that model that you're discussing or that you brought up, that we would say, you kind of got to choose one or the other. You can't do both. Yeah. And, I think so. Both are fun.
Does it change at all if we have separate scholarships for cross country distance runners? That was on the table at one point.
No, because those cross country kids want to run track.
They'll do track. Yeah.
I could get Mayer on a cross country scholarship or a track scholarship. He wants to do both. He doesn't care what you call him. He's an athlete. He's a competitor. He wants to get in with the best and see what he can do. Yeah. That's what's fun. That's what's exciting and inspiring. So why dumb it down and eliminate it for him if it's not going to affect his ultimate destination? If we can still get there doing what's fun. We're going to go to Penn Relays here in 2 weeks. Does it get us anything? No. Is it fun? Hell yes. So we're going to go do it because it's fun. It's something fun to do. Yeah. And guys are excited about it. They want to line up against Washington and Villanova and Wisconsin, whoever's going to show up. Say, all right, let's see who's got it. And at the end of the day, we're going to walk out either with a wheel or nothing else. But the ultimate prize is a wheel. What are we going to do that? Probably stick it back here with some other stuff that's never gotten hung up. And it's going to sit there for the next 10 years. And so we don't really get anything out of it other than it's fun to do.
Yeah. Well,
it's going to be fun.
I'll see you there. I'll be at Penn Relays this year. Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap up. Dave, by the way, I just have to let the audience know, we ask a lot for our guests and in the middle of season. And Dave, we've gone overtime. So Dave, thank you so much for that. So no wrap us up here. You're in what you say, year 21 at Oklahoma State?
21. Yep. Year 21.
You've got some years to go. What's got you excited about the future there at Oklahoma State?
Well, what I really love right now is we went from being a struggling program to one of the best in the country to struggling again to back to one of the best in the country. And that journey, one thing hasn't changed. I haven't changed. My philosophy hasn't changed. The workouts haven't changed. We do get better athletes than we used to. But we were getting better at when we struggled and got to the top, we were doing it with the guys nobody else wanted. Mm-hmm. And then we got the guys everybody wanted and we struggled. And I think what's got me excited right now is we're back to where we were in 2007, 8, 9. We have a group of guys that really like being around each other. We got great team chemistry. I don't know if they're the most talented guys. We got some pretty talented guys, and some of them may be the most talented in the NCAA, but many of them aren't. But it doesn't matter because they're running really well. And it's this chemistry they have, this connection to each other, that's what makes good teams great. And right now we have that. And I think in the 2014-15, I kind of lost sight of what was important. And it was more about X's and O's and what PRs were coming in, who would run to get fast guys and put them all together and mix them up. It's going to come out great. And that's not always the case. You got to get guys that just love being around each other. And our women's team's the same way. We got this group of women who are competitive, challenge each other, but support each other. And I think we're on the front end of one of these waves that we're going to ride for a while. That's really fun to ride. And all these waves break. Everybody's wave breaks eventually. You got to wait for the next one. But we're, I think, just on the front end of one of these really good rides. So I'm excited about the next 4 or 5 years.
That's awesome, man. Man, Dr. Dave, I could have never thought I'd have this much fun with a distance coach. I'm sorry. I just, I'm the sprints, hurdles, jumps guy back in the day. Distance, I love it. It's a great part of our sport, and the steeplechase is literally one of my top 5 events. I do really enjoy the steeplechase. But man, I have had a lot of fun today, man. You're kind of I don't know if this has been we didn't really explore this in your career, but I don't know if you've always been. You're kind of a natural storyteller. I don't know if anybody's ever said that to you, but the way you tell stories, it's just kind of natural for you to roll off and tell stories, man, and kind of paint the whole picture.
Usually, I'm told I'm a natural story reteller. I've heard this story before.
You got to add to your repertoire.
My knock against Dick Weiss is that I've heard every one of his stories at least 100 times. I can tell them better than he can, and yet I still hear them. And people say, "Hey, the student's becoming the master."
Yeah, I was about to say, it's you mimic who you see, right? Representation matters, right?
Yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much. Again, we ask a lot of you for these podcasts. These aren't 20-minute podcasts. These are 2 hours plus. We've been going for 206 right now. And most people say, there's no way we can go 2 hours, Mike. I don't have enough. There's just not enough about me. I honestly feel like you and I could go for 2 more hours. I mean, there's just so much to explore. And
I can talk.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about you, Dave, is, you're still so young. Like you're not even, it may seem like you think you're near the finish line of your career, my friend. But to use a 10K example, which I never thought I'd say that out loud, maybe you're at the 7K. You still got a good part of the race to go, my friend, and a lot to explore and a lot to win and a lot to affect positively the young people that come through your program. And that is the biggest mark that you can make really on our society as well as our sport.
I don't know. Jerry Schumacher, Greg Metcalf, and I have a plan that at some point in the near future, we're going to be someplace on a beach community, sitting out under a tent, drinking our whatevers, playing cards, criticizing all the young coaches and how bad the sport's become, being bitter, angry old men, just hanging out with each other on a beach, being those guys. And, if Jerry has his way, it'll be tomorrow. Greg and I kind of will wait a little longer, but yeah, we, it seems like we've been in this together for a long time. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I've got another 15 years, I think. I gotta be around to kind of get her into college, and then maybe I can go to the beach and play cards with Jerry.
Yeah, I love the Greg, Jerry, Dave. Sounds like the origin of a boy band, all for cross country though. The first cross country boy band.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, man. Thank you so much, man. I'm just so grateful, humbled that you would share your journey with our listeners here. Definitely a lot of value. I mean, we touched on your career, but honestly, I feel like we've given just so much value to those who are who are listening right now on the podcast on just, philosophy, ego, luck. So we prepare hopefully we prepare as much as possible, but sometimes we don't want to credit how much luck has to do with things as well. But I also know that the more prepared people, the harder worker people tend to get luckier. So I think that's a kind of a theme of your story of, working hard working, writing 7-letter page letters to people, and really kind of backing it up and saying, okay, well, yeah, I'll volunteer. I'll help out, man. I just think it's,
I think I saw the thing that luck, we have a quote out in Gallagher Library, and I think it says, luck is where hard work meets opportunity.
Yeah. Amen. I love it. Well, thank you again for being here, Dave, man. I'm just so thankful for you. Really am.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for being here listening. Once again, you pressed play on a 2-hour plus podcast. And if you're still here, you're for the better of it, because Dr. Dave, which I will always call you now from now on, Dr. Dave here gave us a ton of value, amazing stories. I can't wait for people to hear that Leah Daniels story. That's just hilarious to me. And we're going to do it all again next week. Join us next week, and we'll be back here with the Gill Athletics Connections podcast, bringing you another awesome coach around the world. Have a great day, guys.